Welcome to Wickedshizuku's Reviews, bringing you a southern perspective on books, movies, music, and much, much more. Stick around for a while, you just might hear something wicked. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to episode 9 of Wickedshizuku's Thoughts on News. I'm coming to you on September 1st, and we shall just jump right into it like usual. Starting off with Peter Zehan. He didn't watch his last couple of clips for the last couple of days, so we will be catching up with Mr. Zehan real quick. Uh-oh. Hold on. Gotta go back to the first one. I'm putting them in chronological order so we can go back to what he said a couple of days ago.
Lord, Melissa, Jason, how you guys doing?
Good. How are you?
Well, by now, you know you're on a Norwegian ship.
Mm-hmm.
I do.
Okay.
Hey everyone, Peter Zine. I'm here coming to you from the collegiate wilderness, where I'm going to bag a few 14ers this week. Today we're going to talk about Cuba. Now, Cuba, the island, pinches access to the core territories of the United States. What makes the United States a world power is not just the fact that it's basically a continent in size, but it's got the greater Mississippi right in the middle of it, which overlays the world's most productive arable land. Water is the most efficient way by an order of magnitude to move things around. And so as long as you have a long waterway in an area where you actually have things to ship, you can't really help but not mess it up. And believe me, we've been trying for decades. If you look at the last 4 presidents, whoo, and yet we're still here. Now, Cuba, because it straddles the access points to the Gulf of Mexico, has the possibility to end the United States as a major power. But that would require a lot more military force than Cuba is capable of producing itself. So the biggest threat to the United States going back well over a century has been that some foreign power will build a partnership with the Cubans that will break American power. And that's one of the reasons why JFK reacted so strongly during the Cuban Missile Crisis, because he saw it rightly as a Soviet effort to, on the cheap, end the United States. Now, since the Cold War ended and Cuba lost its Soviet sponsorship, I have been expecting a warming of relations and a change in the bilateral relationship for some time. Under Barack Obama, we got a ham-fisted attempt at that was basically negotiated over a short period of time with very little buy-in from the president because he didn't like to have meetings with anyone. And what we got was a deal of limited economic opening, minimal political connections, and...
So you heard that, right? Barack Obama didn't like meetings? Why was that?
It was a bad deal, start to finish. It was sophomoric, it was lazy, but above all, it was stupid. And so when Donald Trump came in, he killed that deal, saying that, we should have gotten a better deal, and he is right. But then he proceeded to not do a damn thing, and that was sophomoric, and that was lazy, and that was stupid. But consider in today's political climate that the two most polar opposite presidents that we've had both recognize the opportunity, even if they proved completely incompetent at building something out of it. So there is movement, there is possibility within diplomacy and economic diplomacy to shift this. Now, the window of opportunity we had after the Castros died is obviously gone. And the new regime, which is the old regime, just with like the third stringers, uh, has definitely thrown in its lot to a little bit with the Russians, but the Russians don't have the money that they used to, so now the Chinese. Now, if you've been following my stuff, you know that I don't think that the Chinese and the Russians are going to be around all that much longer. It's certainly not an ability to project power a hemisphere away. So this is going to come up again and again and again and again. And hopefully the next time around, we will have a competent president who is capable of making a basic deal with a country that has less than 1% of America's economic and military heft that is right on our doorstep that can't possibly reach for support. Gives you an idea of just how little I think of both of the two previous administrations. I don't think that's going to happen under the Biden administration. However, there are a lot bigger fish to fry right now. And at the moment, the Chinese are still there. And as long as the regime in Cuba feels that it has a foreign lifeline, it's going to grab on with both hands. So a deal on this is inevitable. Doesn't mean it's imminent. All right. That's it for me. You guys take care.
Don't mess with Zehan. Okay. It's supposed to be another Zehan clip here.
Warning, you could soon lose your job because of what's happening inside this building you see behind me.
Hello, everybody.
Yeah, so about that whole commercial and everything, that it just keeps popping up. I think it's like the fourth or fifth time I've seen it. But the big problem that people haven't expected, and some who have expected it, which is kind of, not a very likely place to be coming from, which, if you read Andrew Yang's book, The War on Normal People, he goes over this extremely well. And he also even came up with the most interesting way in order to pay for a UBI. It's plausible. However, nobody wants to entertain the conversation. They keep thinking, oh, that's socialism, or oh, that's, just living off the government's teat. However, have you not stopped to think what FDR did in the Great Depression, and he created Social Security checks for the elderly in order to live off of during the Great Depression? Do y'all not remember that? It's essentially something that would be, in essence, the same thing. However, it would be funded through Wall Street. And their transfers. As transfer fees. That's how he came up with it. But since nobody wants to entertain the conversation, it's going to automatically just go over to the Fed. And y'all have all been screaming, in the Fed, in the Fed. Well, UBI would be part and parcel to doing that. However, y'all have lost the time. You can't do it now. The Fed's already got their operations ready to go.
From the cliff band above Horseshoe Mountain, have Sherman, Sheridan, and the rest of the Weston Mosquito Reverse to the north behind me. Split the video in half so you can see the view to the south too. This is one of my favorite places, Colorado, all of a sudden. First time up here. Anyway, above 12,000 feet pretty much all day. Today, after so many of you have asked, I'm talking a little bit about central bank digital currencies. It's not nearly as exciting or revolutionary as a topic as you think. A lot of people are thinking that this is a way that a central bank can control all transactions. In the Western model, that is absolutely not how it goes, and you just need to understand how financial transactions work today. Right now, if your money is in a bank account, you can use your debit card to throw it at a retailer pretty easily, or to transfer it to another financial institution or another account. And as you do that, you're introducing steps and intermediaries, and at each of those intermediaries, there is a party who charges a fee. And one of the reasons that fintech, that's financial technology stuff, has become so interesting in the last 10 years is new technologies are allowing for faster transfers of information, and so therefore faster transfers of funds between multiple parties. And in that sort of environment, there is room for a new technology, a new player to basically cut out the middlemen or replace them with something that's smoother or faster. Based on how you're doing this with a wire transfer, with account balance transfer, it can cost you anywhere from a few $dozen to a certain percentage, think credit cards, in order to get it done. And so there's rooms to slim it down as the cost of information transfer goes down and the speed of information transfer goes up. To be continued. Now we're looking south towards Weston Pass, and some guy decided that 13,900 feet was the place to set up in his cabin and find Chuck. Anyway, a lot of this fintech is basically trying to slim down the process and therefore take that, say, the 3% transfer fee. They only charge 1%, and they drive the other people up. This is even happening in things like real estate. Now, a central bank digital currency, as classically envisioned, exists alongside your paper currency, your coin currency, and is managed much the same way. It's not independent, it doesn't trade independent, it's functionally pegged. It is the same thing, and one is exchangeable for the other. And because of that, there's no additional government control from a government going digital. In fact, if you look at Europe, paper checks were basically wiped out of existence over 10 years ago, and the United States is only now finally getting to that point. So there's room here to take some technology that's not even all that new and apply it forward. But what we're going to see in the next 5 years is going to be truly dramatic in comparison, and it's going to largely wipe out the fintech space. What the US Federal Reserve right now is doing is something called FedNow, which allows instantaneous clearing of any funds transfer using the Fed itself as an intermediary for free. And in that sort of environment, it doesn't really matter what the competition is, Zelle, Bitcoin, or anything else. You can't compete with free and instantaneous with the Fed. So we're probably going to see the overall finance tech space go.
Well, I find a little bit of a problem here, and I'm sure a lot of other people are going to find the exact same problem. If they're not able to get cash, Mr. Zahon. Okay, the problem being, there's millions of addicts out there, and they use cash only in order to be able to purchase their drugs, what have you, their paraphernalia, any of that shit. How long do you think that you're going to be able to keep their drugs away from them? Because they're not going to use this system. And if cash is completely 100% out, what's going to happen to all of those drug users when they run out of cash and can no longer work within their own system, so to say? Well, I'm pretty sure we're going to see a lot of pissed off people. But that's somebody else's nightmare to figure out, not mine.
From being really exciting as people are applying all these two technologies to all of a sudden the Fed just going, bink, you just deal with me directly and you go on your way. They're building the infrastructure right now, and as soon as that is done, all clearinghouses between all corporations, unless they've got something to hide, are just going to use the Fed because it's cheaper and faster and safer. And when that happens, a lot of this discussion over other currencies or alternate currencies is simply going to go away, because there aren't a lot of base cases or use cases for them anyway. But if the Fed makes everything free, even some of those that are kind of a bit of a reach, but you can kind of see it, even those can go away. So it's not nearly as sexy of a...
I'm really not on board either with them saying that, I can only purchase so much hamburger meat per month, or chicken, or pork. It kind of really upsets the apple cart when you're not able to get the same product you once were at a highly inflated price. When you're buying the exact same package or net weight of what have you, hamburger, chicken, pork chops, you're paying 3 times as much for the exact same weight of product. Now, I also get that the farmers are having it hard because of the lack of nitrogen for fertilizer to be able to grow their crops. Well, something to fix that is chicken poop. Okay? So stop giving the whole thing that we don't have enough fertilizer. We can make our own fertilizer out of other things: banana peels, eggshells, milk, Epsom salts. You know, those old remedies that our forefathers used to use in their own victory gardens during World War II. A little bit too much reliance on globalization there. And that's what this has brought us to.
A topic from a conspiracy or a government control point of view, as you might say, the Federal Reserve only has a staff of a few hundred. If they're going to manage transactions, they would need at least 10, probably 100 times as many staff. So that's not going to happen here. Now, that's cool. We got a fog mech coming up. That is not the same thing that is going on in China. China is marrying their digital currency to their social currency store. And it has been a hit and miss experiment so far, but it's definitely Orwellian. And they do have the intention, and they do have the legal structure, and they do have the staff to monitor each individual transaction and allow and deny them based on whether or not you are sufficiently loyal. For that to go down in the United States, you would have to have multiple acts of Congress get adopted, get through the court system, and then massively build out the Federal Reserve System to have some sort of oversight and enforcement mechanism. There is no hint of conversation within the Federal Reserve Congress of anyone wanting to do that. If anything, Congress might take some preemptive steps to make sure that that doesn't happen. But if we do go down that road, there will be plenty and plenty and plenty and plenty of road signs between here and there.
I think you're way too trusting of our government, and I think, Mr. Zahan, that you really do need to wake up to the fact that they do not have our best interests at hand.
Back to the Chinese for a second. If this system works in China, I mean, the place is already an Orwellian hellscape. But basically, this would take the entire financial space and put it under the government's thumb. And in that sort of an environment, if you think small businesses can exist at all, you don't know Orwell very well. So while this might give Chairman Xi what he wants, control, it'll come at the cost of what's left of the most dynamic portion of the Chinese economy. So will they do it? Don't know. They're certainly going to try, though. All right, that's it. Bye.
This credit card has an interest rate that's really, really low. How low? This low. The credit card that's in your wallet right now probably...
Hey everyone, Peter Zion here, coming to you from Colorado. It is early in the morning on August 31. It's supermoon, and the woods are kind of crazy with the animals, and I couldn't sleep. Whenever I can't sleep, I just kind of let my mind wander and see where it goes. So I'll let you to be the judge of whether this makes any sense or not. Yesterday, my time, on the 30th, the Ukrainians launched their largest ever drone assault on Russian positions across the length and the breadth of Western Russia. At least a half a dozen different locations, some of which were several hundred miles from the Ukrainian border, doing a moderate amount of damage to a few things and taking out some long-range aircraft, specifically the IL-76 long-range transport aircraft that the Russians used to transport paratroopers. They've been building in terms of their drone attacks, doing more and more further and further. And a couple weeks ago, they took out a couple backfire bombers, which are long-range bombers, which launch long-range cruise missiles, which were designed to shoot at American carrier battle groups and military convoys in the North Atlantic. You know, all very long-range aircraft, strategic aircraft. And it occurs to me as I was lying there in bed that we may have hit a turning point in the war, not on the Ukraine front, but on every other front that matters. Let me kind of dial that back and explain what I mean. Russia's not a normal country. It's not a unitary republic like France or a federated country like the United States. Instead, it's a multi-ethnic empire. The Russians have never really had territory that is, from their point of view, secure. So what they do is they expand through the flats of Western Eurasia, absorbing ethnic group after ethnic group until they reach a series of geographic barriers that you can't push through easily, like the Carpathians. So this is one of the reasons why I've always thought that this war in Ukraine was inevitable, because the Russians are trying to rebuild that outer crustal defense that they had during the Cold War. And with their own demographic decline, if they don't do this while they still are able to field a large army, they are looking at collapse over the course of the next 10 to 30 years. This is all about buying time for them. So from a strategic point of view, the war makes sense, a lot of sense. That logic works both ways, however. In order to maintain control of a multi-ethnic empire, you have to have a really deep intelligence system that monitors the population for any sign of dissent, and then you rapidly rush troops to any areas where there is a rebellion in order to quash them, which means that the Russians don't simply need long-range power projection capability in order to fight NATO or China or Japan or anyone else. They need it simply to hold their country together. And over the course of the last month, especially on the 30th, the Ukrainians have demonstrated that the strategic deployment assets, those IL-76s, those backfires, that the Russians need simply to maintain their national coherence, are now being threatened. So everything that I've said about the Ukraine war to this point, I think, still stands, but we now need to consider that an aspect of the Ukraine war is that Ukraine is demonstrating that Russia proper might not be sustainable even if they win the war in Ukraine. And that is something that has got to have a lot of people in a lot of capitals stroking their chins thoughtfully, because the Ukrainians didn't do this with NATO weaponry. The United States, NATO, everyone else, they're refusing to provide the Ukrainians with weapons that could be used for deep strike capability within Russia, because they don't want to risk any sort of nuclear exchange. Ukraine did this by themselves, and Ukraine did not start this war with a drone fleet, much less a long-range one. This is stuff that they built with off-the-shelf commercial components, primarily from China, irony of ironies. And if you can do that by basically shopping at Walmart, then the stability, the very existence of the Russian state is all of a sudden called into very serious question just from an internal coherence point of view. And there's issues about this that carry over outside of the theater of the Ukraine war or Russia. And I'm talking here about China, because over the course of the last couple of days, there's been a lot of noise out of the American Pentagon, specifically from Admiral Hicks, about something called the Replicator Initiative, which is to take off-the-shelf, inexpensive, commercial-grade drone technology and make literally thousands, if not tens of thousands, of attack drones that can be used to basically sink the entire Chinese Navy.
Well, isn't that what they had to do during the Civil War anyhow? Is that they had to confiscate like all sorts of silver and metals and golds and whatnot in order to fund the Union? Just a thought. It's called allocating your resources, fella, and being able to put everything to good use.
They've seen in Ukraine how effective this strategy can be. Supposedly, they've already built the technical specs for what they want, and they hope to have the entire fleet deployed in under 2 years. Now, a couple things to remember about the Chinese side of things.
Yeah, I don't think that's possible. 2 years. We're looking at the next election by that point, and past it. So, yeah, it really depends on who gets in, honestly. Who wins the primary, who wins the general, and whatnot. Will we get there? Who knows?
Yes, the Chinese have a very large navy in terms of number of ships, about twice the size of the American Navy. Now, the American Navy still outclasses it. We have much larger ships with much larger ranges, and most of them are centered around the aircraft carrier battle groups. China has nothing like that. But the biggest restriction the Chinese face is the ability to operate far from shore. About 90% of their ships can't operate more than 1,000 miles. So you're talking about most of them operating within the first island chain of Japan, Taiwan, the Philippines, and so on. The East China Seas, the South China Seas. Well,
and Taiwan will be just fine as long as China, just as long as nobody freaking upsets the apple cart. They have the Kyoto Agreement in place. If China moves in, and Taiwan has not declared independence, we have to help them. So I don't think China wants that.
if the United States has these long-range legacy ships that can operate over 1,000 miles from their adversaries and just poke at them, first with fighter craft, then with bombers, and now apparently with drones, then you've basically turned the entire East Asian littoral into a graveyard for the entire Chinese Navy. The biggest problem, as Admiral Hicks pointed out, is that the Chinese have mass, a lot of ships, a lot of people. But if you throw 1,000 drones at it, all of a sudden that's not so much of a problem. And the irony of ironies, the Americans are going to be using off-the-shelf commercially available drone tech for this. Most of that comes from China. So the US military is going to be mass sourcing from China the very systems that are necessary to end China. And the only way that China could stop that is by stopping exporting drone parts, which would mean, destroying a section of their economy right now, which we would probably be fine with if that is the retaliation. The United States gets a lot of crap, sometimes for good reason, for investing in weapon systems that maybe were designed to fight the previous war. But the Chinese have done that too. And they now have a very large fleet of vessels that is simply incapable of dealing with the American military as it is now, much less one that might have additional backbone because of something like the Replicator Initiative. Okay, I'm going to go try to sleep again now. I hope everybody has a great night. Take care.
Okay.
From timcast.com. Tucker Carlson says America is speeding toward assassination of Donald Trump. That's a scary prospect. He said they protested him. They called him names. He won anyway. They impeached him twice on ridiculous pretenses. They fabricated a lot about what happened on January 6th in order to impeach him again. It didn't work. He came back. Then they indicted him. It didn't work. He became more popular. Then they indicted him 3 more times, and every single time his popularity rose. So if you begin with criticism, then you go to a protest, then you go to impeachment, then you go to indictment. None of them work. What's next? I mean, graph it out, man. We're speeding toward assassination, obviously. And no one will say that, but I don't know how you can't reach that conclusion. You know what I mean? Like they have decided, permanent Washington, both parties have decided.
Okay, what Tim is talking about here is that there was a podcast between Tucker Carlson and Adam Carolla, which I do recommend everybody go and check that one out. I would also go check Tucker on X with his interview with the general about Ukraine. McGregor, I think it was General McGregor. He's a pretty good one. He's not one of your TV generals. He's not pursuing a new wine cellar or a new boat. He's primarily concerned about our national security, and that is a very important interview as well. Tucker's been doing a lot of good work, but at the same time, I think he's taking a lot of bad advice from a lot of people. About about Tucker losing the whole Fox thing, or being fired from Fox. I think that was kind of the Georgia Guidestones moment, so to say. It was like the second shoe to drop. First, it was the Georgia Guidestones that got mysteriously blown up, and yes, they have not found the person who did that, if anybody's wondering. But the second shoe to drop, in my estimation, was Tucker getting fired. And I honestly believe a lot of it comes down to the personal issues that happened between him and Rupert Murdoch and the girlfriend and everything. And also, Rupert Murdoch and the Murdoch brothers, it seems like they have been running Fox towards an atheistic sort of view, if not atheistic at the very least. a moral point of view. Because Fox is not as conservative as everyone takes it to be. You are looking at central casting type of things when you are watching Fox. You know, yes, they still put on the veneer that they are the news. However, what are they not telling you? Same with MSNBC, CNN, all of the other little legacy twits out there. And then Disney having lost as much as they have. I don't know if any of cable television is going to be able to make it out of this rut. The streaming services seems the way to go because of the subscription service and whatnot with the apps on Roku. I mean, that seems good. However, here's where it gets shitty, is when you have so many of those freaking apps that you're paying for every single month and you don't know that it's coming out of your card and you forget and you're not using it anymore. And they're still drawing off of your card just for you to have an app that's sitting on your TV that you hadn't used in 6 months. That it's not worth it, you know. That's one of the reasons that I just don't subscribe to much. I don't even have a damn bank card to my name.
That there's something about Trump that's so threatening to them they just can't have him. Later commented, I don't know where it's going, but there's a collusion that's clearly imminent. I've never been this worried about anything as I am about where this is going. If people don't get serious about their comfort zones, I think they're going to demonize him, indict him, and I think they'll blow his airplane up, Jones said, is Alex Jones. I really, at a gut level, believe they're going to kill Trump. There was a story in, I think it was 2015, a guy tried grabbing a gun from a cop at a Trump rally. There's already been threats made against Donald Trump, and I guess we can only hope and pray it doesn't come to that. But Tucker makes a really interesting point. Now, I will counter. He's not gotten more popular every time they've indicted him. Because I track the favorability and popularity of Trump. It is stable. Stable is potentially as bad or worse. Stable means that there are people who don't care what the government does or says, they will never abandon Trump. That's it. It also says there are people that no matter what, will never support Trump.
Right.
If Trump got more or less popular because of the indictments, that would mean something. Becoming less popular means there are people who supported him but now are backing away. If he becomes more popular, it means that people who didn't support him are starting to support him. No, it hasn't changed because it's locked in right now. The left and the right, whatever you want to call it, the political factions are stable. And that means all of the things they're doing are just radicalizing people and making the flames bigger and more dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
Which I kind of assume is what they want, right?
I don't know. I mean, it's... Man, there's a lot of scenarios in my mind. But if Tucker is correct, I don't see how this country survives another year, 2 years, year and a half.
I don't think Tucker's correct. I forget who we had on the show, but he said you can't, in 2023, you can't do what you did in the 60s, right? You can't give somebody the Kennedy treatment. I think they've already done it to Trump. And we've seen it. It's the indictments. It's the mainstream media with all the pieces throughout his presidency. It's all of that. That they've already taken him down, or at least attempted to.
I don't think so.
I don't think
Trump is predicted to win right now. So CNN reported this, not my opinion, calm down, crackpots. CNN said right now, based on all the data they got, it's looking really good for Trump. Now you take into consideration that the student loan debt about to kick back on in the next couple of weeks. Think about this. So I was talking to my girlfriend about this earlier. I said, I was passively talking about it, and then she was like, wait, everyone's got to pay back their student loans again starting in a couple of weeks. And I'm like, yeah, something like that. And then she was like, they're not going to have the money. And I'm like, right, exactly. And then I said, and the question then becomes, how do they pay for their student loans? If right now we had all these videos of young people saying, I can't afford my bills, how are they going to pay back their student loans if student loan repayment restarts? They're not. And then I'm like, so it's kind of like 2008. They gave out loans to people who didn't have credit and couldn't afford it. And then my girlfriend was like, well, they got their parents to co-sign. She's like, a lot of these people got their parents to co-sign. And I was like, interesting. Yep. Then when these 27, 28-year-old.
Yeah, so pretty much if you sent your kids to college in the last 10 years or so, and you co-sign with them and they don't pay their stuff, your house is going to be evicted, or you're going to be evicted from your house, and it's going to be foreclosed on because of that loan. And it was 12% interest, everybody. So you also put all of that interest on top of the loan payments. That's going to be bad. But my dad taught me something very, very prudent while I was growing up, and that is to always pay the interest first and then on the principal. If you pay the interest, the entire interest payment, you can pay some on the actual balance, and you're able to get rid of it faster. So make sure that it goes 100% towards the interest first and then pay the payments. That's how you pay loans off quickly.
Don't pay back their loans, and then the lenders say your mom or dad is a cosigner and goes to them and says you got to pay, and they go, we can't afford to pay, and they go, then we take your house.
Mm-hmm. And we're seeing TikToks of people that age crying, saying, I did what I was supposed to do. I got the degree. I work hard. I don't party. I did everything I was supposed to do, and I can't afford food. And I guarantee if it becomes between student loans and putting food on your table, you're not going to pay the student loans. So you're going to let them default.
But then what are you going to do when you're like, sorry, mom and dad,
exactly.
you're going to lose your house. You're going to have to pay the consequences of my actions. I mean, that is a result of the student loan thing, but I think it's going to make a very divided and bitter society.
A bailout. Also, the only circumstance that seems to make sense would be a government bailout of the student loan system. And that is going to be a disaster, because that's another trillion.
No, it wouldn't. And for those that are out there that say, oh, well, I was so responsible and I paid my student loan off. Well, not everybody's you, okay? But what if, through the IRS tax system, that they were able to give you some sort of credit on your taxes if you did pay off your student loans? And the people that didn't don't get those payouts. Huh? Did y'all ever think about that? That there's some other way to fucking reimburse you for paying your student loans back? Y'all went during the good times of college. Really, you did. I'm sitting here freaking more than, I don't even know how much debt I'm in. I don't particularly care, because if I die, well, there goes, nobody else has to pay it. What a mess.
Plus, instantly pumped into the economy by way of forgiveness, which will cause massive inflation, or has already contributed to it. But, oh boy, if you thought Richmond north of Richmond was bad, wait till you go to the likes of Oliver Anthony and say, oh, here's the best part. The highest income earners in the country, who have nothing but disdain for you and told you to go learn to code, just got a $50,000 freebie from the government.
Yeah. And if that happened, that would mean pumping another trillion in would mean that your dollar is worth like 96 cents right after that happens. All those people that already paid their loans back, that have their money devalued, are...
Well, our dollar is only worth like fucking 12 cents as it is there, Ian Crossland. You need to catch up. Yeah. I'm pretty sure Glenn Beck has went over this thoroughly over the past, 8-10 years or so. Your dollar is only worth 12 to 16 cents as it is. The rest of it's taxed.
Are going to go... maybe not all of them, but a lot of them get angry at people that are taking taking the government's tip.
To go back to the initial story, right? Tucker is saying, where does it go next? People need to consider that none of this stuff is happening in a vacuum. And when it came to the lockdowns and the George Floyd riots, I actually think the lockdowns were the cause of the riots, not George Floyd. We had seen protests before. I do not believe the George Floyd video is the reason why we had such massive and widespread rioting. I think the rioting was likely people were fed up.
This is where I kind of disagree here. I kind of think that we had another Michael Brown and smartphone IIA operation happen. That's just my opinion. But that's what I think happened with the George Floyd incident. I think that Facebook had a lot to do with it, and I think that Google had even more to do with it.
Locked in their homes. They were angry. They had no income. Their purpose was stripped. They were becoming unhinged and depressed. And then they were given some, a spark for the tinder. A lot of people will probably say it was George Floyd, whatever. The media definitely said it was George Floyd, but I think we talked about it at the time, that this pent-up rage from being locked up. So you take a look at what's going on with Donald Trump as president. You take a look at what's happening now with student loan repayment about to kick in. The economy may fall off a cliff in the next couple of months. You got the guy from Shark Tank saying it. You got Michael Burry of Big Short fame, who shorted the housing market, making a $1.6 billion bet against the S&P 500 and NASDAQ. I think both. It might just be S&P. And we don't know if he's actually cashed out yet or where he's at. But he made a very, very, very big bet against the U.S. economy. And the student loan repayment seems to make the most sense. People who don't have jobs, who can't afford to pay their bills, being told the bill comes due, they're not going to pay it. If you go up to a 27-year-old and say, you can pay your rent, you can buy your gas.
Either that or the moratorium on housing. Could be that. I would think that that's almost just as big as the student loan debt out there.
Or you can buy food, or you can pay your student loans. They're going to say, okay, well, if I don't have food, I die. If I don't have gas, I can't go to work and can't make money. And if I don't pay rent, I'm homeless. Sorry, student loans ain't getting paid.
For anybody that has student loans that isn't able to afford them right now, you can do two things. You can put them on a forbearance, or you can put them on a deferment, depending on your income level. So look into that. You can set them off for years and not have to pay them.
That is
But
smart.
isn't most of the student loan debt basically owed to the government?
Yes. Over 90, I think it's like 90, at minimum 94%. The majority of it is owned by the government. So the government gave you bad loans and then is saying you have to pay them. Actually, we might just bail ourselves out. We don't know what we're going to do. I mean, it's a terrible system. And we're still issuing student loans. Sorry, I don't want to cut you off.
No.
It's a point of irritation with me.
Well, they're definitely still issuing those, and yes, they will bail themselves out. It's exactly like 2008 all over again.
Because it just seems like a terrible business model. Yet the U.S. government's like, no, it's fine. Keep getting student loans. Go to college. That's the answer. Even though we have evidence, it's so clear the system is broken and potentially could destroy generations of a family that have worked really hard to create financial stability.
Yeah, I completely agree. And speaking from a perspective of a father, my son is 17. He'll be 18 in October. And I've even written articles about this and talked about it on TV. Raising a son, and someone who's looking like me the older he gets, and I'm thinking about his prosperity. The only thing I've ever been worried about with my son is what is he going to do as far as college. That's the only thing. I wasn't worried about puberty. I wasn't worried about any of that stuff. Worried about him being rebellious. Never worried about that. The only thing I've ever been worried about, probably since the age of 12, is like, oh my God, my son's about to be a teenager, and he's going to start thinking about what he's going to do after school. And I think about how unfair of a message it is to spread to kids that the only way for you to find success is to sign on a dotted line. You have no credit history, right? You have no income, you have no job prospects, but you have to sign on a dotted line and have hope that whatever you're intending to pursue is going to work out. And obviously, that's not what happens. And every year, some kid is competing against you, and so on and so forth. And they're unprepared. And then you send them out into the world. So they work at Starbucks making minimum wage and tell them they have to pay back $80,000. Meanwhile, their parents.
Now, mind you that, not every place is Alabama, and they're making $7.25 per hour at starting pay. There's other states that have different starting rates. Bit of advice. When it comes to the colleges, go to the one that's closest to you and the most inexpensive, and that has a good graduation rate. a percentage of the students that actually graduate from the university or community college. But no, Mike Rowe is the dirty jobs guy. He's definitely right. We need more trade people. We need more people actually working trade. Either that or all the migrants are going to come in and they're going to gobble up those jobs. I mean, what is it? You know, y'all are all going to keep saying, oh, to amount to anything, you have to go to college and get a degree. That's not true. And those that sit there and are still spouting that, you're part of the problem. And you need to check yourself. And you need to be the ones that actually go do your homework. Because some people, they don't need a degree to turn a wrench. They don't need a degree to wipe a baby's butt. Okay?
Parents told them, well, that's what we did. Yes, but you're not in their situation. You're not dealing with a gouging student loan market. You're not dealing with universities who can charge whatever they want because the federal government will pay it anyways, right? They're not dealing with these things. And parents, as a parent, I'm saying other parents have given.
And as a parent that has my first child in college, and my husband is in college, and I'm in a sojourn right now, the best thing that you can do for your college kid is to go to their SGA meetings, Student Government Association meetings. Every student that enters university is automatically made a member of the Student Government Association of their university. Every single one of them. Okay, it's up to them to actually go to those meetings, or you go with them. That's what I would recommend. You want stuff done? Well, start going to the meetings.
Given their children bad information, and they're not being aware of what is actually going on. They're just telling them to follow my footsteps, or they're following their footsteps into financial hell, basically.
Yeah, it's like the area that they walked through is now flooded, and they
Right.
tell their kid to walk back through it. That's
Right.
not a good tactic.
It's like when parents say, well, why don't you just go work at McDonald's? That's how I've paid my way through college. Yeah, you can't do that these days.
So how did you inspire your son? What's his next move? What advice did you give him?
I told him the truth. I told him that college is incredibly expensive and you need to weigh all options. There was a period of time that he wanted to do artistry and he wanted to go over to Japan. I've told him, go to other countries.
Japan's good.
Yeah. Now he's changed that idea and he's still thinking about it. But I'm not one of those parents like, you have to do something as soon as you turn 18. He wants to go bounce around Europe next year, but he's working. Nice. He's been working this entire time. We started doing homeschooling, but I'm having him think for himself rather than force a narrative onto him that the only way to find success in this world is through college. And for me, as someone who worked in IT, I did the same job as everybody else who got their computer science degree. I went to an 11-month program, for tech school.
Instead of 4 years of bachelor's and crazy amounts of tuition.
Yeah, my student loans are paid off. So, there are alternatives. And I think parents just have to be aware that what you went through is not what these kids are going through. They're set up for failure going that route. They're set up for a lifetime of financial hurt.
And radicalization.
And radicalization. And one other thing I just want to add, we're talking about the economy dipping. Interest rates for housing. My wife and I are looking to buy a house next year. We're looking at the interest rate. What's the situation that we're going to be facing? So now the kids have, I don't know how much money in debt.
Oh, fella, that's a bad idea. I would hold on to where you're at and stay where you're at until all of this mess actually blows over somehow and the interest rates come down. I would not be selling my house. I would not be moving. Unless you're moving to somewhere that is much, much cheaper and you are able to actually sell your house before you're able to go. Don't give up what you already got.
That the interest rates are going up. So even if some kid is able to find a decent job, they can't afford to purchase a home. Rent's gone up. One of the reasons we're looking to buy a house is because we renewed our lease. $300 increase.
Yep.
Well, one thing, don't have a kid live in the dorm. That's another expense that they sit there and they want to push to you. Oh, your kid has to live in the dorm. Oh, your kid has to buy into the meal plan. Well, if that's the case for the meal plan, go ahead and pay for the meal plan, because sometimes you get stranded and you got to have something to eat. You know, with that, now that I've been diagnosed with diabetes and everything, and it's a whole new learning curve and everything. I have learned that I have to eat now. I mean, one of my biggest problems has always been skipping meals and forgetting to eat. There's been days that I have gone and not even realized, hey, when was my last meal? It was days ago, because I'll grab a few crackers and I'm good, and I don't need to eat anymore. So I mean, it's very perplexing to me of why they do some of these things with the plans and everything. But the meal plan, in cases of emergencies throughout the semester, you got to have something like that. However, when it comes to the dorm, your child should still be living in the house with you. The other parents that, oh, I can't wait until my kids turn 18 so I can just push them on out of the house and I'll have an empty nest. What's wrong with you? Seriously, what's wrong with you? They're not ready to go out into the world with how dumbed down they are in society today. You can't do that. The Obama administration made the parents responsible until the age of 26 that you have to cover your kids on your health insurance. Well, everything else follows along with that. I'm not letting my son out of this house until he graduates college, if he decides that he's going to graduate college. So, during the formative years and everything, keep your kids at home as long as you can, or even better, when father is giving your daughter away at the wedding, kind of thing. However, that's a moralistic tradition that, just seems a little old school for too many people. But my kids, they're not leaving my house until they are either, my son says, Mom, I'm ready to move out on my own, and he does it, or either my daughter comes and says, Daddy, I have found the man I want to marry, kind of thing. So, that's just how me and my husband roll.
Now, thankfully, we make decent income together, but we're a married couple. What about these kids, right? So I foresee the Europe is like a European style setup that's happening in America, because all the European adults that I know, most of them live with other people, live with other adults. They all have roommates.
That's where we're going. Thanks for watching this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. Hang out with us live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. and become a member over at timcast.com for uncensored
Joining us right now to discuss this, and it's not just an American problem, is Piers Morgan, host of Piers Morgan Uncensored on Fox Nation.
Alex
Piers,
Jones
we
is
were talking about
least
this
favorite
a little
person.
at the break and on the 5. This is getting worse, and it's not just an American problem. Did we start it?
I would say yes, but I would also say that in Britain we've got the same problem of the woke left trying to dominate an agenda, which means that their rights for a tiny minority of people are now supplanting the rights of the vast majority. And I want to ask, when I hear that poor mother there talking in the way that she did, I want to ask, where are the rights of girls and women in all this debate? Why are women being erased? Why is the word woman now an offensive term? When did we allow biological males to dominate women's sport and wreck it irrevocably, potentially? When did we allow young girls to be in some kind of locker room and have biological males walking in and derobing in front of them? When did we let this happen? And how can this be happening just after the Me Too Time's Up campaign, which went on for years and was supposed to be all about protecting women? Who is now protecting women? And I address this as much to other women as I do to you or to men. We can say as much as we like about this, but so many women have been cowed into silence. They're too afraid to do what that mother did, because if they do put their head over the parapet, they get shot down and called transphobic.
Which is nuts. You think it's 1919 or we're living with the Taliban in charge, but it's not. So the administration is
Well, if you haven't realized exactly what the hell they're doing, I'll go ahead and lay it out for you. This is the transcript, okay? The transcript is exactly what happens to civilization when they become too big, so to say. And what happens is that you get these deviants, and then you get these people that support the deviants in the eugenics movement. And the eugenics movement, if you don't know what that is, the eugenics movement is where they want to control civilization exactly how it's supposed to be rolled out and everything, and that they're the ones that have the best plans and blah blah blah. The globalists, as Alex Jones would say. But their biggest thing is to be able to get humanity. They want to breed humanity into perfection, from the way I've always took it. But however, when civilization starts to get too big and despots start running things, like the teachers unions and like the publishing houses and whatnot, okay, it will deviate into heterosexuality. It will deviate into transgenderism, because the first transgender surgeries that ever occurred was in 1925, everyone, with a male that had a uterus transplanted into him. He died 3 days later. It's not going to work. It's never going to work, and it will not work.
Not just jumping on the transgender side. They are staying, I don't know, straddling the fence. Listen to what KJP said, talking about this thing, or really not talking about it. Listen.
The Department of Education proposed a rule, as you know, that gives schools the flexibility to establish their own athletics policies. And so while establishing guardrails, right, to prevent discrimination against transgender kids. And that is something that is incredibly important.
She can't even say it with a straight face, man. She's sitting there looking down at the paper, blinking her eyelids. She can't even say transgender straight anymore. She's so frazzled. I mean, it's to the point where this poor girl is just going to quit soon. That's how I see this rolling out. She's not going to last much longer. KJP is going to be replaced pretty soon. I mean, she's come to her. She's come to the point where she just no longer can lie, and the press will actually believe her anymore. I mean, Peter Ducey, he tries his hardest to try to have a gotcha on her every single day. But she's starting to get frazzled, and you can tell by these curls right here exactly how frazzled she is. Okay? She's not keeping it moist. She's not keeping that hair moisturized on shampoo day. I can say that.
The president wants to make sure that we also do that as well.
They can't figure it out. They want the school districts to figure it out.
Well,
they don't know what's good.
Well, she also went on to say that the issue of trans athletes...
The school districts have more power. Okay? Think of it as a tiny fiefdom. And your local school director is the laird. Okay? You want anything to get done? You go speak to the laird. And don't do it in front of people, you idiots. What you do is that you write them a nice letter introducing who you are, and then you set out exactly where your lines are, what you will not tolerate, and if not, then they can see you in public. But don't try going and screaming up a storm at the very beginning of it because you found out that, oh, they have genderqueer in the library. Book burnings, when they started, was because of the LGBTQ movement in Germany. Okay? So now that you know that fact too, think about it. Are we going to end up like the SS? Are we going to end up like the German citizens and made to come out and clean up the streets of the Holocaust at gunpoint of the Soviets? How about Dresden, Germany? Anybody?
In women's sport is very complicated and there's no easy solution. No, it's not complicated, and there's a very easy solution. You ban them. Canada today in cricket, I know your favourite sport, but the Canadian national cricket team has picked their first transgender cricketer. This is a cricketer who, as a male, until 2 years ago, was incredibly unsuccessful, never got anywhere near international competition, will now be representing Canada. What does that mean, Brian? That means that a biological female has been deprived of the chance of playing for her country because a biological male who was nowhere near good enough as a man to compete at that level is now considered an elite sportswoman. It is completely outrageous.
If I'm right, track and field got ahead of this, and they said, no, that's not going to happen.
Some sports have done it. All sports should do it. And by the way...
Well, there's also another way. Anybody that's in one of these teams, Riley Gaines out there, why didn't you start a lawsuit saying that your school was breaking Title IX against the school, the university itself? Huh? Why didn't y'all do that? Class action lawsuit of the entire swim team. Go up against the Leah Thomas and the university. Why didn't y'all do that? Instead, y'all are going around all the fucking mainstream media and y'all are crying. Y'all aren't doing it the right way. You're able to redress your grievances, and it's called the court system. It's called a fucking lawsuit.
It's not about being transphobic. I want trans people to have the rights to fairness and equality that we all enjoy. That doesn't mean that in their campaign to get those rights, they damage and diminish and destroy women's rights. And so I say, look, in sport, very simple. You have another category for trans athletes, completely new category, or they compete against their biological sex, as many of them used to, less successfully.
Why this is so easy to solve. I wonder why we're not. In the UK, they say this, we want to take it. NHS doctors are told not to ask trans patients their names because it's rude, intrusive, and insensitive, according to officials. So you cannot ask them their gender? You cannot ask them their name?
Oh, it's ridiculous. I mean, look, a little thing, but when I fly on British Airways, obviously always British Airways, but when I fly on British Airways, there used to always be a soothing, monotone British accent that would say, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to your British Airways flight. Now they're not allowed to say ladies and gentlemen because there might be somebody who identifies as something else on the plane who might or might not be offended. To which I say, what about my right to be called a gentleman? What about a woman's right to be called a lady? When did those rights get completely destroyed at the altar of trans activism? I want their rights to fairness and equality, but I want my right actually to be called a man and a gentleman. I want women to be called women. I want girls to be protected. I want women's sport to be protected. And I think the vast majority of people in America and Britain and other countries agree with me.
But California is not only doesn't agree with you, they're suing a district that says, no, we will tell your parents if you're a 12-year-old girl and you want to be a 12-year-old boy, and they're being sued. That's the Chico Unified School District.
Well, you've seen this case of an 11-year-old girl who apparently was a little confused at school, and the school said, right, we think that you're secretly wanting to be a boy. We're going to help facilitate that. We're going to allow you to identify as a boy at the school, and we won't tell your parents. The parents sued and have won $100,000. That's how this is going to change. You're going to see a lot of lawsuits because I'm the father of an 11-year-old girl. I've got 3 older sons, but 11-year-old girl that same age. I watched the interview with the mother and daughter on Fox today, I think it was. And what was striking, this girl who had been confused is now not confused at all. She's a girl.
That was Fox and Friends.
Right. So that was your interview, I think. And I remember thinking, right, so that's my point. They are not emotionally or psychologically or physically equipped to make a decision about what they want to be. The parents should be involved in that decision, and the schools hiding it from parents, in my view, is a form of state-sponsored child abuse.
What if your school had that policy where your daughter goes to school about not informing the parents? What would you do?
I'd go completely nuts. I would identify as a raving lunatic, and I would go in there and I would pull her out and I'd say, she's not coming back here until you stop this woke nonsense. And most parents would feel that way. Now, the idea that my daughter could somehow be a boy at school and that was hidden from me as her father, I would find completely outrageous. And I think most parents think that.
You know what I also would think? Most teachers agree with you.
Yes.
And they are subjected to the teachers' unions that said, you step out of line, you lose your tenure, you lose your position, and they don't get paid enough anyway.
Too much corporate American, and I include unions and all of that as well. Too much corporate American, corporate Britain, and corporate Canada and other countries. They're getting bullied into taking positions on this stuff, which tailor to a tiny minority of activists, and they are forgetting about the vast majority of people who actually lead common sense lives and who want basic principles about the society they live in to be upheld.
One New Jersey teacher came out and said they were told by the school district to hide the fact that a child told them about they wanted to transition. So what do you do if you're the teacher? You speak up and do the right thing, you lose your job the next day. And the thing is, it's easy to say do the right thing, but when you got kids at home and you got to make a living, it's tough.
We've had a clinic in London called the Tavistock Clinic, very infamous clinic, where they were performing these surgeries on young kids who wanted to transition. What would have happened with that 11-year-old girl, right, who thought she was a little bit confused, who was probably a bit of a tomboy? Remember tomboys? Remember how prevalent that was?
Yeah, I was one of them myself. I was big tomboy, but came out just fine. Accepted my role in life. And that's what needs to be put to people is, you were born this way, and you need to actually come to the acceptance stage of being that way. Just because you're born a girl doesn't mean that they can make a schlong for you, okay? Sister can't be a brother.
A lot of girls would go through a phase of being tomboys. The idea that they would then be seized by society,
Absolutely.
put into a clinic and mutilated before they had a chance to really even go through puberty and work out for themselves what are they actually going to be in life is, to me, inhumane.
I don't know how well you studied my biography before you come on.
I've read it 15 times.
Right. So
I want to be you.
Right.
You are the Mick Jagger of television presenters. You are the Duracell bunny. You're the man who never sleeps, the man who always works. You are a template for all of us.
Okay.
And you should just identify as a Duracell bunny.
Well, if I could finish my thought, I totally agree.
You mean the Energizer bunny there, Pierce Morgan? You're a little out of touch. Just saying.
In 5th grade, I declared I would not be interested in a girl that wasn't good in sports, like Tatum O'Neal, in Bad News Bears. I don't know if that you carry that.
Yeah.
Right. Tatum O'Neal would have been forced to be a guy.
Of course.
All right. Thank
you. Of course.
I enjoyed your first appearance on Laura Ingram's show.
You know what? She wasn't what I expected, but she's now apparently, Laura is now identifying as Brian Kilmeade.
Just for today.
Which if you think you haven't heard a horrifying transition enough, this is as bad as it gets, people.
Evidently, it's okay to come.
It is a fact that 90% of Americans stress about money. So people want to make
China's Commerce Ministry is saying that restoring stability in U.S.-China trade relations is the best way to, quote, de-risk, claiming it would stabilize business expectations and increase business confidence. U.S.
How funny it is. And if you've been paying attention during the Peter Zahan clips, you would also know that China is a decreasing power. See? This is why we need more babies, everyone. Because their currency is pretty much, it's built on a house of cards. And foundations of stone quickly collapse and crumble. Right?
And EU officials often use the term de-risk to describe their relationship with China and how they're not looking to completely separate or decouple, because, you know, that's been floated out there. Well, U.S. Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo is in China this week, and she said, quote, decoupling is neither in our economic or national security goals. Spring, Iowa Congresswoman and member of the House Appropriations Committee and House Select Committee on China, Ashley Hinson. Congresswoman, good morning.
Good morning, Cheryl. Thanks for having me on.
A couple of questions here. First off, what do we think that Gina Raimondo really accomplished on this trip? It doesn't seem like a lot. And then also a follow-up here with regards to Taiwan, because, you know, the point is being made, if China does make a move on Taiwan, they're going to end up with all that military equipment that we helped Taiwan acquire.
Right. Well, first of all, I think we need to start acting toward China based upon what they're doing, not what they're saying. And unfortunately, that's not what we've seen out of this administration. We've seen continuous appeasement out of this administration. Before the secretary's visit, she went in and made restrictions loosened on Chinese Communist Party companies. And then state media applauded that. I think anytime Chinese state media is applauding any decision by the U.S., it's probably not in our best interest. So they're making...
Oh, damn. Did y'all see that? Hold on. Let me go back a second. Gold is now $1,900, $19.72 It's up $6.20. Bet y'all didn't know that you can grow gold. Didn't know that, did you? Look for SREE tips here on YouTube. They'll teach you how to grow gold, titanium, and silver. Dude's actually growing gold.
Applauding any decision by the U.S. It's probably not in our best interest. So they're making concessions to get in the room. They're not getting any accountability out of these visits. In fact, they're making us weaker on the global stage as a result of these visits. We need to start treating China based, again, on what they're doing.
Oh, also, he's growing platinum too.
Not on what they're saying. They are lying to us. They are spying on us. They are cheating, and they are ramping up their military at a rate that should be alarming to the entire country and the entire world.
Then why is
I'm calling on the Biden administration to speak loudly and carry a big stick. I think that's the policy that we need to have toward China, because they are escalating. As far as Taiwan is concerned, yes, it is a huge risk, and that's why our select committee has put out a whole slate of recommendations on how we can empower relationships in the region, continue to develop trade relationships with folks who do share our democratic values of freedom. That's the tactic that I think we need to be taking in the entire Indo-Pacific.
Well, and I was going to ask you, I mean, you look, the concern here, why are these Biden administration officials, and then John Kerry, who's not technically in the administration, but he is, going one by one to China? Like, what is the goal here of this? I asked another congressman, one of your colleagues earlier, is it because they're trying to grease the wheels for a Xi Jinping, President Biden meeting here on U.S. soil? What do you think?
Nah.
I'm not sure what their end goal is, Cheryl, but I can tell you this. We're certainly seeing what this message is sending around the world, and it is continuing to project that global weakness and global appeasement. It's no coincidence that President Putin of Russia is now going to meet with President Xi in China. They are continuing to strengthen their alliance. I think that should be a huge signal around the world of what's happening in that region. So I'm, again, calling on the State Department to start calling on China for some concessions here. The status quo is way too dangerous to maintain. We need to be going in and asking for accountability for the fact that they have flown a spy balloon across our country, accountability for the fact that they continue to send Chinese nationals across our southern border. We don't know how many of those people are spies and are working directly for the Chinese Communist Party. But one thing's very clear, everything the Chinese
every single exchange student in a university is a spy. Just saying. They have to report back to someone in order to be able to stay here. And thinking that they're not doing that, you are completely just, yeah, y'all, there's no hope for you.
Communist Party does is intentional, and we need to take it as such.
Well, I was going to ask you about that, because we're learning that the number of illegal Chinese nationals encountered at the southern border is obviously surging under President Biden. Even in this fiscal year, there's been over 39,000 Chinese national encounters. That's a 115% increase compared to the last full fiscal year under former President Trump. Your reaction to that?
Well, President Biden clearly doesn't care who comes across our southern border, whether it's a Chinese national or a Chinese spy or people on the terror watch list. We've seen an incredible surge at our southern border, and that's a direct result of the failed policies coming out of this Biden administration. Look, our border security is national security, and as a result of those failed policies, we have the cartels that are winning, the gangs that are winning, drugs are pouring into our country. China is empowered because of the drug war that's happening. They are sending those precursors to Mexico, which are then fueling the cartels and their business model. So again, China is at the root of all of this, and it's very clear what their intention is. Their goal is by 2049, and President Xi has said this, they want to be the superior economic, military, dominant power in the world. This is all part of their giant plan to make that happen. And if we go into this with eyes wide open, I think we can be successful in preserving the American dream. If we continue this campaign of appeasement coming out of the Biden administration, I think we're due for decades more of Chinese dominance in the world.
Well, they're certainly making their mark. All those illegals coming up to New York City. Councilman Joe Borelli's on set with me. Go ahead, Joe.
Congresswoman, you guys in the House GOP, you passed a border security bill back in May. What do you think it will take to get the Democrats in the Senate to finally act? I mean, now given this unprecedented number of Chinese migrants that have come across the border, is there any new pressure or additional pressure that you guys can put on them?
Well, I certainly hope so. The numbers certainly tell a very compelling story. The crisis that's happening in communities like New York, the crisis that's happening in rural communities here in Iowa. I had a town hall a couple of weeks ago where a local sheriff and police chief came out and said, hey, we're seeing increased massive amounts of methamphetamine and fentanyl coming into our small rural communities as a direct result of the border crisis. So I think Iowans have certainly had enough of this. Thank goodness our governor realizes that and has actually sent some resources down to the southern border to help where President Joe Biden is failing. I've certainly called for Secretary Mayorkas to resign, and if he doesn't resign, he needs to be impeached because he is failing at doing his job. But again, House Republicans have delivered. We passed a border security bill that will help not only supplement our Border Patrol agents so they can continue to do their jobs, but enable the use.
I just want to make a point. My brother loves this point. Is that while walls keep people out, it also keeps people in. Just want to say that. And always keep it in mind. While they might promise safety and security, it can also be a prison. If y'all not ever seen Escape from New York or LA, think people.
Of technology to protect not only our southern border, but our northern border as well. We don't want to ignore that. So I think we've delivered the roadmap for what this country needs going forward, but this is a national security issue. And I just hope we're not too late and there's not something terrible that's in the works, whether it's a Chinese plan or someone else. We know the Taliban has obviously been empowered thanks to the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan. So again, those are my concerns. That's certainly what keeps me up at night as well.
Well, and then of course, President Biden failed to mention the 13 servicemen and women that died.
I'm sorry, honey. It doesn't look like you've been losing much sleep.
In that disaster in Afghanistan at the airport. I
actually wrote a poem about this on Twitter, if anybody's interested. And it was called Commander Pudding Brains. Because Joe Biden was allowed to roam, 13 boys and girls came home in boxes short and long, wearing the colors, as they did nothing wrong. I've cried so much because of this. This right here. These people, and I have not been able to stop. Those were my husband's brothers and sisters.
He just, I guess he forgot. I don't know. Anyway, Congresswoman Ashley Hinson, it's always great to have you on the program. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me, Cheryl.
All right.
So Mitch McConnell had another incident today. We talked about the previous one. He just stopped in the middle of a press conference and froze and just stared blankly into space. This is really, really sad. I'm going to show you the video now. Here's what happened today.
What are my thoughts about what? Running for re-election in 2026.
Blankly staring here. His aide picks this up.
Did you hear the question, Senator? Running for re-election in 2026?
He does not react at all. Still keeps blankly
All right,
staring.
I'm sorry, you all. We're going to need a minute.
Yeah, we're going to need a minute. Other aide comes over, talking, trying to get him going again. Just still blankly standing there.
Okay.
Somebody else have a question? Please speak up.
Now, look, if you're an aide, it's a smart thing to say, yeah, please speak up. He just couldn't hear you, even though I just screamed the question into his ear 10 seconds ago. This keeps, I mean, I guess they think he can keep going. I don't know why. And here's how this kind of ends.
Senator Daniel Cameron, do you have a comment on Daniel Cameron?
Well, I think the government race is going to be very close. Far and away the best candidate we could have nominated. And I'd say he's become increasingly Republican. In fact, the government now becomes
He's kind of just mumbling here. Hard to make out what he's saying. But he is seemingly talking about.
I think we can do one more.
Senator, what is your reaction on Trump's latest indictment? Would you support him as a nominee?
It's a question about Trump.
Yeah, I'm not going to comment about the presidential race on the Republican side.
Okay, thank you all. Thank you. Sorry, thank you.
And then he's kind of walked off. Looks very ginger. Look, we said this about Dianne Feinstein when this was going on. We've said it about Joe Biden before. Has no reason to be in this role. But we'll also say it about Republicans. This is a disgrace. I feel really sad for Mitch McConnell. I think he's obviously going through a process that we all get to at some point. But you should not be the Senate leader when this is going on. You should not be in the Senate at all. He should be out of leadership by the time you hear my voice say that sentence. This should be over. This is the second time this has happened. One time, I said it when it happened one time, it was enough. And it's not even an anti-Mitch McConnell sentiment. It's not an anti-Dianne Feinstein sentiment. It's not an anti-John Fetterman sentiment. These people are incapable. Their brains don't work. When your brain doesn't work, you can't have this job. We should all be able, this should be obvious to every single American, regardless of party. Now, the way this works, he should, look, out of leadership immediately. I understand that there's some process that needs to go on when you're talking about a Senate seat. There are other considerations with party and everything else. This is why Dianne Feinstein remains, right? But in this particular case, it was Mitch McConnell himself in 2021 who helped push a law through in Kentucky that said, instead of having the governor, which is now a Democrat, just pick who the next senator would be in this type of situation, the party of the senator will go through and bring a list of 3 senators to the table, and then the governor will pick from that list of 3. So you'd get a Republican. It wouldn't change the balance. This has to happen. Let this poor guy go home and live out the rest of his days with his family. It's a disgrace, and it's an embarrassment, and it should end today.
Got a good point there, Stu. Will it happen? Not a chance.
What do you make of the recent...
Okay, this is not the news. I know this. However, I do check out interviews and whatnot like this. A lot of them. Lots of them. You just have no clue. However, I thought this was very interesting because Eric Weinstein, he is the brother of Brett Weinstein, who is the host of Dark Horse podcast, along with his wife Heather Haying, something like that. However, I watched another clip from this particular interview a few days ago about the Epstein stuff, and I found it very, very fascinating that he had met Epstein. So I wanted to see what his take on it was, and it's like, wow, I never even realized how convoluted the university system is. But if you go and watch that one, oh wow, people, you'll get lots of info out of that one.
UAPs, I think, is the new term. Eric, you need to get up with the times here. They're not UFOs anymore. That's the old.
I wasn't even in this game when it was UFOs. So,
okay. So what do you make of the recent UAP stories and detention and response and subsequent response?
I'd like to ask you first.
So I had a look at the first whistleblower from about...
So that right there was a deflect. Just saying. Not answering the question with a question or answering a question with a question is deflection.
2 months ago, quite closely with Andy Stumpf, who used to have pretty high-level security clearance, and he explained to me about how unimpressive that particular type of security clearance is, how very common.
Which one? This is David?
Yes, David. No, not David Fravor.
No. David Fravor was the Tic Tac.
Correct.
This is David Garush?
Yes.
Okay.
Very common level of security clearance.
No, he's talking about the guy that came out as whistleblower for the UAPs and everything. Joe Rogan just had the alien nuts on a day or two ago, so go check out that one. They say a lot of very enlightening things about this whistleblower and his limitations and what he could say and what he couldn't say.
That you're using that as some sort of this is a legitimate credential. It doesn't really wash too much. That it was third-hand information mostly, second-hand information kind of. I heard from a person who saw or who heard.
Right.
It just seemed to me to be rather, on the face of it, unimpressive. That release.
I see.
What did you think?
Well, like I've been telling everybody, these are highly conserved stories. This is not the only person I've heard this story from. I've heard this from multiple people. There are various versions of this secret world which play out as space opera.
For example, you have David Icke and the Reptilians, you have Carrie Cassidy and the Edens, and you have all sorts of others. Okay? So, there are so many people out there that are claiming crazy alien shit. That's all I have to say. Crazy alien shit.
Then MJ-12 became the real government that only even the president couldn't understand. And it's like, okay.
Okay, you want any information about that? Find a book called The Secret Journey to Planet Serpo. I call it pseudoscience. Some others, they take it seriously. I really do find it as pseudoscience because you will see in an upcoming review that I will be dropping soon for that particular book, and going through very meticulously and saying which books you need to read, and where they pulled this from, and if any of it has any type of legitimacy, which I don't think it does. I've read the book twice. Back when it first came out, I had a paperback of it for a while, and then an online friend gave me an ebook version to it, and I for the longest time, I can't believe that a lot of it influenced my way of thinking the way it did. Until I went through it again when I was during this break from school, this medical break and everything. So after reading it the second time, I was so infuriated that I couldn't believe that I had been believing this claptrap for so long.
So that's the weird part about it until you start realizing how sober many of the people are who believe this and who claim to have had direct contact with it. And then you don't know what to do. I mean, in other words, whatever this is, there is a thing. It's not necessarily little green men. It could be, for example, that they mock up a floating spaceship in a hangar and then they drag people past it and say, whatever you do, do not look to your left or right or you'll be shot. And then, of course, people look, and then, like, mission accomplished. Now people will say, oh my God, you have no idea the U.S. has incredible technology. And then maybe the idea is you've got a cover story. Maybe you've got your adversary investing in things that don't make any sense. I don't know. But there's not nothing here. This is not about Mylar balloons and seagulls anymore.
AG1 is so much more than a greens powder. In one single scoop, it delivers daily multivitamins.
I'm trying to come up with a word for it, but it's like recursive false flags.
Yeah.
In a way, where the goal is not to give or hide truth, but to fire hose with information so much that the truth can no longer be discerned.
It's a haste.
Yep, that's exactly what they did with COVID. Just saying. It was like the fire hose was turned on for information. You could barely get anything beforehand, and then all of the pressers started with President Trump and Fauci, and it was just a fire hose from there. You couldn't, you were just drowned in information, and we have been ever since Trump came down that golden escalator, everybody. That's the psyop. They want to drown us in information.
Stack of bullshit to make sure that any needle is very difficult to find. It is.
Yes. Bullshit haystacking. I love it. Yeah.
Okay, so they haystack the crap out of this thing. I have no question that there was something that was used to develop U.S. aircraft like the B-2 bomber and the SR-71 Blackbird. So if you see something crazy in the sky, better that you think it's a UFO from outer space than some advanced thing from Lockheed. I have no question that we used this to deal with things like the Chinese balloon shoot down, where we shot down several things in a week and we couldn't recover debris from any of them. I mean, come on, guys. Maybe the idea is that this is a head fake to our adversaries to develop the wrong things and to use their treasure on things that won't work. Maybe there's a secret program where some of this stuff is actually real and true, and we're not allowed to know it because it would be too mind-blowing. Maybe there's a cult inside of our government that has replaced angel.
This is too funny. I don't even know where he's going with this, but yeah, it is run by a cult. It has to be. There's that's the only explanation of why they keep doing such shitty things to the American people.
With saucer-shaped aircraft. Whatever this thing is, it's being used for many different purposes. There's something here. We just don't know what. This is the problem. The princess can't feel a pea because that would be impossible. The princess feels a disturbance. You can't say what the disturbance is. Maybe it's a golf ball. Maybe it's a cantaloupe. Maybe it's a banana. But whatever it is, there's something wrong with the mattress.
That's not the point. That was not the point of the story. Dude. Not the point of the story. It was a test set by the mother of the prince. That only a princess that would be able to feel the pea under a stack of mattresses would be worthy of her son. Because princesses were to be delicate flowers. And alright, I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, it seems to me this fire hosing, the goal of uncertainty.
Right. How do things muddle out? who wins in a muddle is a great question we're not taught to ask. Sorry to jump in on
No,
it, but
tell
I
me
just
more.
love, always look for who is trying to muddle to win. Like very often you're in a dispute with entrenched status quo. And somebody will say, well, I guess we'll have to agree to disagree on this one. Like, oh, well, who wins if we agree to this? Oh, it's you. Right?
Yeah.
This is like an old principle of mine, which is that you can always tell.
Actually, I would think that that was for people who just do not like to argue and don't like rocking the boat or upsetting the apple cart and go do their own thing without anybody giving them permission. It's what an omega is in a wolf pack. Yes, they will on the surface follow what the alpha commands. That doesn't mean that they're going to do it.
Who's guilty by who first declares a time of healing.
Why? Why is that a razor to use?
Oh, because if you do something wrong and the public is clamoring for your blood, you say, there's been too much blame and finger pointing on all sides.
At me.
Yeah, Joe Biden. I'm sure that that we'll have probably about 7 or 8 more drops before they finally do escort Mr. Biden out of the White House and Mr. McCarthy in. Because Kamala doesn't have a snowball's chance in hell of actually becoming president if they 25th him because of her naturalized citizenship. Question. Her parents weren't born in the U.S. Your parents have to be born in the U.S. It's one of the rules. Duh. You don't believe me? Go look it up for yourself. It's called our Constitution. And then the Webster's Dictionary.
I think what we need is to come together and declare a time of healing.
For me.
Right. So I believe that in general, whoever declares a time of healing is suspect number one.
That's a very nice razor to use. I wonder about this. Oh, how would you say? Epidemic of uncertainty.
Brilliant. Speaking my language.
And I wonder,
it's a fact. In the new economy, average people are becoming millionaires faster and easier than ever before.
first off, how as an individual you are supposed to put up any kind of effective defense, to just take some sovereignty, being, an agentic individual.
Right.
And secondly, I wonder what the end goal is. I understand why uncertainty would be useful for manipulation, because if people can't discern truth from untruth, it can be easy to poke them and prod them and float them in particular directions. Mm-hmm. But it also seems like, I don't know, kind of also useless as well, that some people, non-insignificant, large cohort of people will just reject it entirely, which actually makes it more chaotic and more unruly. So it makes me think, well, maybe if this is the case, if the fire hosing is happening,
right,
this epidemic of uncertainty, maybe the outcomes were predicted but haven't manifested in the way that was intended. Maybe there's more of a rebellious streak in...
Say more about that. I'm not trying to understand it.
That if you make the public very uncertain about most things by overloading them with information, or by even it doesn't even need to be coordination. It could be a byproduct of having 24/7 access to the entire world's population through Twitter and Instagram stories and blah, blah, blah.
Right.
There is so much I can no longer discern, even due to a multiplicity of opinions that's not coordinated to be a multiplicity that go in opposite directions.
Right.
Well, my answer, Eric's will probably definitely be different, but my answer is just turn the shit off. Don't pay attention to it for a couple of months and see how much better your life gets. Don't use social media.
if it was coordinated, the outcomes that are occurring at the moment, a lot of the time, don't seem to be happening with people just, oh, roll over, tell me exactly what to do. There is a massive, non-insignificant cohort of people that say, I'm checking out, and I now no longer trust anybody at all. And that doesn't seem, yes, and that doesn't seem to be, if the goal was ease of control, that doesn't seem to be effective for the person that wanted that or the group that wanted that to be the outcome.
First of all, I'm really glad to get a question about this as a sea change, which is that our lives have become wall-to-wall uncertainty. We can't discern. If the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor today, we would spend 10 years discussing whether it was a false flag, whether it was actually the Japanese, whether there was any attack, whether it was a sound stage, whether it was a psyop.
Well, something that a lot of people don't know about World War II and the beginning of it is that the Japanese were already in Alaska attacking the Aleutian Islands, the island chain on Alaska. True story. There's a memorial up there, and it says so. They were some of the first ones up there in World War II, before it even broke out on the United States side. That's the reason we really went into it, even though a lot of people say that it was a Zimmerman note that caused it. That wasn't the case. We were quietly taking care of the Japanese that were up in the Aleutian Islands. But it was hushed up because back then we didn't have technology in order to be able to transmit all of this information between each other. So that's a good thing that we do have technology at our fingertips now in order to be able to find out those things. I think that the next World War is going to be quite difficult for a lot of sides, for the sole reason because of the transmittance of information. It won't be nearly as easy, but it's still just as terrifying as the last time. We now know that duck and cover is completely, it don't work. It was just something in order to be able to alleviate the fears of most of the people in the Cold War.
Whether it was right now, the main institutions of our society have abdicated their role for public-spirited adjudication of what is true based on expertise. And so what you're seeing is people coming to hate experts and coming to hate institutions because they're realizing that these institutions lie to them at a level that they've never considered unless they were Alex Jones fans to begin with.
Oh my goodness. That's funny. You had to bring his name into it. Okay. How about the reason that people don't like experts is because they don't retire? That they don't step aside and let the new generation come up. And this is exactly why our politics is in the exact same state. Name recognition and all of that jazz. Try that. Vote for somebody that you never heard of. Hell, I mean, my local drunk would be a better mayor than Joe Biden as president. The local drunk. Okay, he'd be a better mayor than Joe Biden as president now. Just all across the board, down to your local bean counter, your dog catcher. Doesn't matter what that public position is. If it needs to be voted in, you need to get different people in every single cycle. Either that, or we can actually go to a Hunger Games bingo ball style, and people can actually, it's who are we going to have as a representative this time as a bingo ball slot to make it fair. Take money out of it. Make it a public service that's required. Your name comes up and you're chosen. You do a shitty job. Well, everybody's going to be blaming you for those 2 years. But there would be somebody different in every single Congress. But who wants actual solutions to any problems? They don't.
And so what you're having a large number of people waking up to the idea that, yeah, there really are organizations and working groups that determine what you hear from a multiplicity of venues. It's the same message relentlessly.
Do you think people are overly pattern matching that now?
Say more by what you mean.
That they're seeing conspiracy where there isn't, because the lack of faith in institutions.
Same person is saying that they see a conspiracy and they see no conspiracy. They have part of their head that remembers that conspiracy theorists are crazy people. And they've got part of their brain that remembers that normies who don't believe in conspiracies are crazy people. And they can't integrate those things, right? They cannot figure out, how are these things being coordinated? Am I a crazy person for seeing these patterns? Am I a crazy person for ignoring
them, believing them,
for when they're unearthed? What you're seeing is a complete destruction of bedrock reality that if you weren't actually physically there. How do we know that these people actually met in a warehouse? Is this really a table, or is it just, CGI? Was it green and we could superimpose wood onto it? Nobody knows what's true. And
it's a fact. In 2023, more regular people have a successful online business than ever before.
So, by how many commercials I've gotten in this particular clip, which I think is up to 4 or 5 now, I don't think that I can particularly trust this podcast for the sole reason of all the paid promotions that you're having in it. I know how it works too.
If you ask me, well, Eric, how are you dealing with this? I would say I'm failing. I'm just flat out failing. As are all of you. I'm just more honest about it. Some of you have an idea that you've got one lens, which is fix the money, fix the world. Bitcoin, that's the answer. Yeah, Bitcoin, rock on. But no, that's not the answer. Or somebody else says, I really think that we just need to be open and tolerant and realize it's a big world and we just have to give people their due. Well, that doesn't work either. You can't just let everything run riot, or we have to go back to our institutions. With these people at the helm, are you kidding? We have to abandon our institutions. Wait, what are you saying? We're going to abandon our institutions? Do you know what that looks like? Nobody has an answer.
In other news, this episode is brought to you.
Okay, so that's the end of that particular clip. So I'm not sticking around for his advertising. Oh, Mr. Eye Patch. Here we go.
A new law banning gender-changing care for minors is going into effect today in Texas. The state's high court is allowing the law to proceed after a lower court issued a temporary injunction. Texas.
I'm sorry, when they actually take away the stupid rule that I have to be the one to take Tylenol or Advil or Benadryl or what have you up to my child to give them one Tylenol or Advil or Benadryl, etc., in front of the school nurse. I don't think that any state should be doing this at all. Because if you ban something, you're just going to pull all of those deviants right to you. So Texas, get ready now that you've done this. Just saying. Because they're going to be like you, like moth to flame with this.
This Congressman Dan Crenshaw says the gender-affirming care is actually pseudoscience and has introduced a bill to block funding for any children's hospital that provides the procedure to minors.
Okay, so I have read his which book is it? What did he call it? I can't remember. It was his memoir or whatever. And he tells you the story of how he lost his eye and how his other eye is all jacked up too. So he's really sitting there blind, almost. He's very close to blind.
minors. Can you please explain? Welcome to you, sir.
Yeah, hi, thanks for having me. So there's a couple parts to this. First, let's start with the so-called science of transitioning a minor into a different gender. There is no science backing that up. There's no science showing that there's these benefits associated with doing these therapies, whether it's puberty blockers, hormone therapy, or actual surgical interventions. In fact, it's quite the opposite. All of the systematic reviews, which is the gold standard of evidence-based care, which looks at all of the different studies and puts them together and analyzes them properly, show that there's little to no evidence that there's any benefits to this whatsoever. So you're imposing a very, very drastic change, a physiological, permanent.
And what I would also say is that be very careful on any build that this guy sponsors, because he's definitely a big, big shareholder in Raytheon and Lockheed Martin. And that is quintessential military industrial complex right there. So, for what it's worth, Texas, get on it. Vote this guy out, please.
Change on a child, and you can't show any benefits. That's a really big problem. So what we've done at the federal levels, I've introduced a bill, and we've gotten it to the House floor. We'll have that debate on the House floor soon. On whether we're going to fund children's hospitals programs, their GME programs, graduate medical education programs, if they're doing these kind of transitions. And look, that's how you fight in a divided government. You've got to take must-pass bills like this one, the funding for these hospitals, and you've got to attach our own values to it. And that's what we're doing.
Yeah, I mean, at last count, that amount of money was more than $15 billion in continuing medical education, graduate medical education. So that's a significant amount of money. We wonder about statistics on gender dysphoria. The British Medical Journal said this very recently. More adolescents with no history of gender dysphoria are presenting at gender clinics. For example, a recent analysis of insurance claims found that nearly 18,000 U.S. minors began taking puberty blockers or hormones.
So that's the number we have. We have 18,000 deviants out there. Now, they're going to be messed up one way or another, and we're going to need the psychiatric help when these people become adults. So, if anything, and your child does insist to go to college or want to go into the medical, please encourage them to be a psychiatrist.
From 2017 to 2021, with that number rising each year. What do you, Congressman, believe is behind this rise?
Oh, so I need to multiply that by a couple of times because of the years that's went by. So 18,000 times 6, maybe. That's a lot of people.
Well, look, and there was another study that showed if you know somebody who's transgender, then you're, I think, 7 times more likely to identify as such. And look, you don't want to belittle the issue too much, but it is kind of like a trend, right? Just like you see people wearing something, you want to wear the same thing. You see people doing something, you want to do the same thing. And in this case, it's more psychological. You feel like teenage angst, you feel anxiety, depression, whatever you're feeling at that moment in your life, and you're looking for a reason why. And so then people start looking on the internet, and so this is where the internet comes in and social media comes in, and it says, look, this is why you might be feeling this way. And then you go down this rabbit hole, you go down this path, and more people start to identify as such. It becomes the explanation that they were looking for. It becomes the causality that they were looking for when it really wasn't. And so it has become this sort of social contagion, really fueled by social media and, of course, easy access to the internet. And a lot of groups who are telling people very dishonest things like, hey, there's only 1%.
And he's not telling the truth either, because he completely forgot to even mention that there's psychological operations that are going on in the American people. And the first ones that they started with were children through the use of TikTok and other social media platforms, everyone. So get off of those platforms.
Chances you'll regret it. Those are not well done studies. These are bogus studies that doctors are telling parents and children, and people need to know about this.
Well, perhaps that's one perspective. There's also the perspective of those who have gone through these changes. And one notable piece of testimony was from Chloe Cole on the consequences she suffered from gender transition. Listen.
My voice will forever be deeper, my jawline sharper, my nose longer, my bone structure permanently masculinized, my Adam's apple more prominent, my fertility unknown. I look in the mirror sometimes and I feel like a monster.
And consider.
Well, honey, you did it to yourself, and your parents let you, and they enabled you in order to be able to do that. I'm sorry for your plight, however, that was what you have to deal with now because you let the devil in. Just saying. And I'm done with this topic, so I'm not watching any more of it.
America is on the cusp of the greatest power outage in American history, but the mainstream media.
Let's talk.
Whoa! Somebody actually had the balls to ask that? Wow. Miracles happen every day, everyone.
Talk about why I'm here.
That was President Biden laughing off a question about House Speaker Kevin McCarthy's request for his bank records. This comes as voices are getting louder on Capitol Hill about opening up an impeachment inquiry into his role in Hunter Biden's business deals. Archived emails that were released by America First Legal reportedly show over 1,000 emails exchanged between Hunter Biden's Rosemont Seneca firm and then Vice President Biden's government office. Joining me now, New Jersey Congressman Jeff Van Drew. He's a member of the House Judiciary and Transportation and Infrastructure Committees. Congressman, good morning to you. And to be clear that these emails came from the National Archives, 200 of them were redacted because of who knows what. But of the 800 others, there were conversations where his company had absolute access to the vice president's office, including employees of the company, not just Hunter Biden.
Well, you know what? This is an example of, again, this president, when he was vice president, not being.
Okay, so when a congressman's mantelpiece starts looking like that, that's when we need to get rid of him, everyone. That's just my opinion. But when they have digs like this, that's when it's time for them to go. Okay? You see my little living room / office / bedroom? There's only enough rooms for each person in my family in this house, with the exception of the kitchen / entryway. That's it. There's 4 other rooms in this house other than this one, not counting the bathrooms. There's one in the hallway and there's one in right off my bedroom, which is also doubled as the laundry room. Okay, I live in a tiny place, and I don't ask for much, but when I see politicians like this having digs like this, it's time for them to go.
Being able to tell the truth. And here's the bottom line. I mean, for Joe Biden, whether it's pretending that he had a huge house fire and comparing that to what happened in Maui, or whether it is what we're finding out when the National Archives released over 800 emails, that there was constant communication between the office of vice president, at that time Joe Biden, and this law firm. And yet he has literally lied and said he didn't know anything about his son, his businesses, his law firm, anything that he's doing, and that nothing was inappropriate. We know damn well it was inappropriate. We also know that, this isn't the only example. We know that at least 20 times he was on phone calls, literally with his son, and discussed business issues, and he won't be willing to come forward until we press more and harder. And that's why we're pushing so hard in the Judiciary Committee, because we want the truth.
Well, here's a question. Will that impeachment inquiry, will it strip executive privilege? Because if he signs anything to that effect, what I haven't got, because Joe Biden could have already done this and nobody knows it. Just like that pocket pardon that Trump supposedly wrote for himself. You know, that theory's floating out there. Well, what if Joe Biden has already done the same damn thing for Hunter Biden, and Hunter Biden's just waiting until, you know, the big major day of sentencing and say, oh, I have presidential pardon. You need to get him out before that day. Just saying.
Thank God we have a Republican majority, because if we didn't in the House of Representatives, none of this information, none of it would be known. And by the way, why is it that over 200 other emails, at least, have not been released, that they're using executive privilege to ensure that we don't know what is going on with those other 200 emails? I'll tell you why, because there's something wrong, there's something crooked, we need an impeachment inquiry, and you know...
Well, if I recall correctly, I'm not too sure, I'll have to go back in history books and whatnot, but after Bill Clinton was impeached, instead of removing them, they stripped his executive privilege. So if you impeach him yet not remove him, he will be stripped of his executive privilege no longer in order to be able to do the job, so to say. But I'll have to go back and look that one up for you. I'll get back on that one.
So when you use executive privilege, it should be because you're worried about national security or have some serious reason. If you didn't do anything wrong, Joe Biden, make sure that it's all released. We want to hear the real story. And I don't think it's going to be a pretty story. I've been saying for a good amount of time now, we are ready, we're long past ready for an impeachment inquiry. It's time to find out what's really going on. And the impeachment inquiry gives you more investigatory powers, and the impeachment inquiry gives you even stronger subpoena powers that you have to get the answers much more quickly. It's time. Let's do it.
Well, Congressman, you are going to be heading back to work very soon. So we also want to ask you about this, because the White House is pushing for a short-term CR bill to keep...
That's definitely one that's really getting to me. I've written several handwritten letters to my politicians, at the very least, saying that I don't, since I've never been on a vacation, I don't think that it's right for them to even step foot outside of their fucking office. Okay? That they should be, their families should be in their representative seat every damn day. Not just their committee meetings, which that committee process and that meeting, or, you know, the committee system, that needs to be done away with. That's what really needs to be the bingo ball draw right there. Is that, oh, well, you're going to be on the Select Foreign Services Committee, sorry. You know? And all of 435 members actually have to do something. That they don't get the committee, the committees that they want. They are assigned committees. See, until we get rid of that committee process and structure of the system, we're not getting anywhere, people. Because you keep voting people like Jim Jordan and this Yazoo back in. You know, this is the reason we have problems. Y'all are so damn worried about those committees, when the committee process could have been fixed already. They don't do it because they don't want to. They go into those committees of special interest because they're lobbyists. Or they have lobbyists whispering in their ears, promising them sweet nothings, giving them balls of cash. That's the reason that they go into specific committees. And the more suspicious ones are like Marsha Blackburn from Tennessee. She's being in there on that old education committee and the Judiciary Committee. Yeah, get those people out. Vote them out, peoples.
The government funded past September 30th. Some are in favor of passing the bill. Others say a threat of a shutdown may curb runaway spending. So Maria asked Utah Congressman Burgess Owens and South Carolina Congressman Ralph Norman about this and how this could all happen alongside the impeachment inquiry that you and I are talking about. Listen to this.
If you've traded the markets recently, you need to see this.
Stop spending hours trying to find good trades. Just do.
What are you going to do in terms of
We're
voting for
hoping-
this continuing resolution, Congressman Owens?
I will be voting for the continuing resolution. We want to make sure, first of all, we can continue to run our business. At the same time, we do have a lot on our plate. It's going to be, I think, almost impossible for us to do it all within the next 2 or 3 weeks.
Where do we stand on a shutdown? Are you expecting that as well as an impeachment inquiry?
You can do both. It's like walking and chewing gum, but we're going to use the power of the purse. And if the threat of the shutdown, which they're using, look what's happened in the past. The government shut the American businesses down and schools if we don't get conservative spending under control to shut it down, which we will do if we have to do that.
Congressman, your thoughts on this as well?
Look, nobody wants to have a shutdown. I mean, we don't want to have to go through that. However, what we really don't want is, well,
Oh, it doesn't matter. They'll get paid anyways. They're called furloughs. Everybody. It's where they don't pay people. And that they're put back a couple of paychecks. But it still comes back to them when it opens back up. So don't be fooled by that one about them. Oh, we're going to shut down. Yeah, they're going to lose their income. That's what they do. They lose their income and then they'll steal it from the American people through your taxes. Some way, some form. So it's just another form of theft when they shut down the government because they're not bringing in their own income.
well, is a situation where people are forced to vote for legislation dealing with the budget that includes things, just for example, like drag queen ambassadors, that includes things like social equity with transgender studies. We are wasting money. Even in the military, we stripped this all out on the National Defense Authorization Act, and it has to be stripped out of these bills because it doesn't belong there. It is trying to push Democrats' social agenda to change the very social fabric.
Okay, I want you, Mr. Jeff Van Drew, representative or Republican of New Jersey, who used to be Democrat. I want you to remember that when Joe Biden vetoes whatever comes through, and that Congress is able, with a 2/3 vote, be able to pass bills and pass laws. It doesn't have to be just up to the president. So, maybe we shall get things done. Or, all of you keep playing your political theater, and Brothers Grokky will happen. And they'll do it while you're at home.
To change this country in ways from which we'll never recover. So, I'll do anything and work hard with anybody, but the bottom line is that I will not vote for that stuff. It's time to stop it.
Okay.
It's time to have a backbone.
So you're okay. So you're in the camp that says, let's push this to the end. I do want to ask you about what's happening here in close to your district anyway. President Biden is offering up 11 sites for New York City to send illegal migrants to. Mayor Eric Adams is now saying, well, we're out of room. One of those locations is the Atlantic City Airport, Congressman. That actually is in your district. So this district is not going to affect your district. What are you going to say to the administration about this?
Well, first of all, just in general, we all knew all along, we should have known if we didn't. I've been saying for a good amount of time, for years now, that this immigration problem, it's not just a Texas problem or an Arizona problem or a California problem. This is a United States of America problem, self-created. This is what this president wanted to do. Eric Adams believes in sanctuary cities. We don't. We don't believe in a sanctuary airport. These people shouldn't even be sent back to New York. They should be sent back to from where they came. They shouldn't be here to begin with. And the worst part of it is they're bringing a lot of bad.
Well, if you watched the last episode, you would also know that I came up with a small solution for that, is for the governors to get off of their fannies and to actually enforce their labor laws and start shutting down businesses that hire illegal immigrants for those jobs, unless they actually do have their work visas, which I doubt many of them do. So that's what you do. You get the governors to actually enforce their laws. Governor Bentley did it here, and Kay Ivey still has that stuff well in hand. It's the people that you have to worry about that pay under the table. And those shady businessmen. So take that for what you will. Put it in your pipe and smoke it.
Each and every person is, but we have a legal rule of law. You have to go through immigration in a normal process, and we're not following that at all.
Well, they
And
want to
they've been
fast
giving
track
all
it.
kinds of
They want to
stuff.
fast track it now and get them work permits. And I don't know, maybe then they can actually vote. Just a thought there. I want to bring in Joe Borelli. He's on set with me today. You two know each other. Joe, go ahead.
Okay.
Congressman, I actually want to ask you a little bit about your past life as a Democrat as it relates to this problem. You've been years ago in conference with a lot of these people in closed-door meetings with Democrats in the legislature and Congress. What do you think the off-ramp is that they can come to some sort of consensus? They have to see that the train's running off the tracks right now. Where do you think, knowing some of these people, they would find the off-ramp for this crisis?
Well, it's a strange business. It's one of the reasons that I left. I just couldn't take it anymore. They don't allow a lot of different ideas and thoughts. Supposedly, they always want diversity. Well, they sure don't want diversity of thought. You're basically told what to do. Everybody's in lockstep. And it's a lot of times bad stuff. I mean, these are bad people, corrupt people that are doing bad things. Individually, you may talk to a congressman or a congresswoman on the other side of the aisle. It seems to make sense. But when they get together in their caucus, it is like a mob scene. They just don't care. And their priorities are really not the vast majority of Americans' priorities. I don't care if you're just a working person that's a Democrat, Republican, or independent. Just regular folks don't like what they want to do to our country. It is why I was left. I left when I was told that I had to obey or else I'd be in big trouble.
Oh,
and
wow.
you know what? I am from New Jersey.
Okay.
You don't talk to me that way.
But Joe's from Staten Island. I think you two have that in common as well. Congressman Jeff Andrew, it's good to see you, Congressman. Thank you for being here. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Transgender. It's made very, very cool through the media. With TikTok.
Another
From timcast.com. Alabama.
Yay, Alabama, Crimson Tide. Just look at all those monkeys on the other side. So, yes, this is exactly what Mothers from Mothers to Monsters is about. In my articles, you can go look them up. This is exactly what it was about, and this is exactly what my first two articles really stress. Because these trigger laws were put into effect when Roe v. Wade was overturned. They had the legislation already ready. They had it all agreed upon, everything. So, any Alabamians wanting to run out of state in order to be able to get that abortion? Sorry, monsters, you're not able to do it no more. Yeah, so this is not good. This is definitely not good. It's going to eat up Alabama's resources, what little we do have. And I don't like it. Don't like it at all. And like I've said, I'm not against the procedure itself when the mother is in trouble or there's something wrong with the pregnancy itself. Aborting a baby just because it has Down syndrome or there's going to be some sort of complications such as diabetes, or, other things, not an excuse. Not an excuse. They're meant to be here. So, that's where I stand on that one. I mean, if the mother's life's in danger because she had a car accident and the baby can't live because the baby's already dead inside, I mean, yes, I would say go ahead. Try again. But when it comes to, just outright, I'm going to kill it because I was irresponsible, well, you're going straight to hell. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It's murder. That thing has a heartbeat. It's a human.
Attorney General says the state can prosecute people who facilitate out-of-state abortions. Alabama will not permit abortionists to defy our laws and enrich themselves by marketing hopelessness to women. What did I say? What did I say a few months ago? What did I say when Roe v. Wade was overturned? My concern is that you will end up in a situation where a state that bans abortion says or encounters a conflict with its citizens, its residents, and a state that has limitless abortion. This is a component of that escalation. We've talked about even recently Colorado and Oklahoma, where in Oklahoma it's completely banned, in Colorado it's completely unrestricted. What happens when there's a couple, they're together, they get pregnant, as it were, and then after 6 months the woman says, I'm just really unhappy, and maybe justified, maybe not. Maybe she's the good person, maybe she's cheating and she wants to leave. She goes, I cannot leave my husband unless I get rid of this baby. So at, let's say, 7 or 8.
No, that's not true at all. There's women that leave every day. No, the woman that wants to go and get an abortion just because it's just no longer convenient in the relationship, you shouldn't be a parent at all. Just saying. And, one of my big things is, any of these monsters going and getting an abortion, I sure wish that they were sterilizing you at the same time so we wouldn't ever have to fucking worry about you again. If you can't hack it as a parent, don't spread your legs, girls. All right?
8 months, she flees in the middle of the night to Colorado. The man then says, the baby can survive, and she's going to kill it. And he reports her to law enforcement.
That's the reason that fathers also have a say in this, too. And y'all taking it out of the father's hands that got you pregnant?
Would Oklahoma take action? Now, apparently, as of now, no. But this is what Alabama has effectively begun the process of. And not even in the scenario I described. In the scenario where you have like a guy saying, please, officer, law enforcement, the baby is 8 months, gestated and can survive outside of the womb. Do not let her kill it. I will raise it on my own. She can leave. I don't care. And she says, no, I don't care. I'm gone. I'm going to go.
And that's exactly what they're doing here in Alabama. Is giving fathers a right as well. And in order to call this shit out because too many of their old ladies took off. That's the reason that Alabama's doing this. This is an outcry for the fathers.
Go do it. There's a conflict. In Alabama, they're just saying outright and they can do it. Here's the story. Alabama has the power to prosecute people who help women leave the state to get an abortion, according to a new filing from the Attorney General Steve Marshall.
Meaning that if you fund or contribute to a woman leaving this state, you're going to get accessory charges. And it'll be accessory to manslaughter or murder. From what I understand, I'll have to look a little bit further into it and read the rest of the bill and all of that. But yeah, that's what they're going to do. And it's going to be a hefty, hefty jail time.
Marshall has challenged a lawsuit filed by two pro-abortion groups, the ACLU and the Yellowhammer Fund, against the state. The AG has asked the United States District Court for the Middle District of Alabama to dismiss the lawsuit. In his motion to dismiss, Marshall pointed out the plaintiffs are not challenging the constitutionality of the state's broad ban on abortions. Instead, they argue that because some other states allow such abortion, plaintiffs have a right to conspire with others in Alabama to try and have abortions performed out of state. Plaintiffs are mistaken. Prosecuting someone for forming a conspiracy in Alabama is not an extraterritorial application of Alabama law, simply because the planned conduct is to occur beyond state lines. Plaintiffs assert that there is some difference because the object of their conspiracy is legal where it might occur, but they don't explain why that.
Tim's also glossing over another problem that Alabama has a really bad habit of doing, yet not a lot of people are on the train with this when they don't realize it. How are they able to get that information that people are conspiring? How are they going to do that, huh? With the help of Facebook, everyone. With the help of Twitter. With the help of other social media platforms. in your DMs. You think those are private? No, they're not private. Not at all. Shit, the safest one I would say right now is Telegram. Just for the sole reason that you can nuke all of that shit and it'll be gone. There's no, how you say, throwback machine or time machine for that one. Yeah. There isn't that. So if you thought you were safe and you had private conversations in those social media platforms, you're so very mistaken. They spy on your private messages just as much as they do your wall. And they're a good portion of the reason why some warrants are actually carried out and why there are warrants served. Think it over, everyone.
Makes any constitutional difference, and it doesn't. The conspiracy is what is being punished, even if the conduct never occurs. That conduct is Alabama-based and within Alabama's power to prohibit. Now, to take that interpretation of the law and apply it to the scenario I was...
See, also something that other people do not understand about Alabama is that one of our conditions when we were let back into the Union, and since we were the very last one going back to the Union, was that we had to, we have to follow absolutely every single federal statute that there is. All of them. Federal statutes. And then Alabama layers on more. So it's not just, oh, you know, your state laws will protect you. No. Not that way here in Alabama. If it's also a federal crime, you're getting charged with that too. People say that double jeopardy doesn't happen, but I have seen it. I've seen it. And I know people that have undergone this miscarriage of justice. But what can you do when you're a piss poor peon without any prospects?
Just proposing. A woman in the middle of the night decides she's going to leave her husband and travel to another state to get an abortion so that she can leave him. The state then says, premeditated murder, not the act itself. We're getting you for what you planned in our state, and we have evidence that you packed up, prepared, and sought to leave to go get aid in the killing of a human life. And did she talk to anyone before? Did she in any way get advice from, get funding from Planned Parenthood, for instance? What happens then in Alabama? Let's go to Alabama right now. The question I ask you, under this ruling, a woman goes to a Planned Parenthood or an underground clinic, but Planned Parenthood is probably the better example. And they say,
yeah, good luck trying to find that in Alabama. You're not going to find it. No, not unless you're over in Birmingham or you're up in Huntsville or down in Montgomery. You are not going to find a Planned Parenthood in this area. Call that your local health department.
I want to get an abortion. They said, we can't do it in state, but don't worry. Here's the information you need to cross the borders. What happens then when the AG gets a bunch of state troopers and they surround a Planned Parenthood and say, you are all under arrest for criminal conspiracy to commit abortion? I'm not saying that happens anytime soon. I honestly don't know.
Well, honestly, unless you have the okay of the governor from that other state, I don't think it can happen, because you have to be able to extradite people from other states over state lines and whatnot, and that extradition, that gets pretty pricey. But at the same time, yeah, that if it is set in stone Alabama law, I mean, they'll extradite your ass. Doesn't matter. If it's for a failure to appear to a civil court tort, or if it's for missing your probation officer, you're going to get a failure to appear and they will issue a warrant for your arrest, and they will extradite your ass from whatever state that they find you in. And, a lot of people, they can go years and years and, be found like 15 years down the road in, I don't know, for example, Utah or California. Yeah, you'll still get extradited to Alabama.
My point is this. This is exactly what I was worried about when I said, with Roe v. Wade, the next grain of sand in the heap is going to be law enforcement saying, we've banned abortion. Doesn't mean you can just go do it somewhere else. It's illegal. And then what happens when a person is a fugitive from the law, getting an abortion in, let's say Oklahoma, Colorado is the best example. Oklahoma petitions, as everyone's talked about with Trump and the marshals and how it would go down. Oklahoma petitions the federal government, says a fugitive from law is currently in Colorado. What happens when Colorado says we're a sanctuary for abortion and we will not allow you to enforce this warrant?
Mm-hmm.
You got the makings of federal and interstate conflict.
Yeah, it is kind of hard to understand what will happen. I really don't know. Alabama's an interesting study for a couple reasons. Their abortion ban won't. That says women who obtain abortions are not civilly or criminally liable. So they couldn't go after the woman herself for going out of state, but they could go after, like, the Yellowhammer Fund would pay for her travel, let's say, or put her up in a hotel. So they could go after anyone who's involved with that organization. The other thing about Alabama to note is that,
well, the thing about Alabama is that we're not stupid, and we know that there are declining birth rates and that we need more babies in the world because we can't keep fighting these old men's wars.
they have the Human Life Protection Act, which passed in 2019, which is also interesting because I remember pre-Roe, we were all talking about this was sort of something a lot of states were preparing for. They were updating their abortion-related laws, and with the Human Life Protection Act, it defines the fetus as a person legally.
Correct.
And so
in Alabama?
In
Yes.
Alabama.
Wow.
So again, they were taking steps to define all of these things that we debate and that are debated nationally.
Yeah,
all
we
the
already
time
had this
because they
debate.
have a strong position
We already
on it,
came to a
and what they wanna
consensus
do.
on it.
And like I said, I think it's hard to tell what would happen. Every state has different laws. So with Alabama, they wouldn't go after the woman. They would go after, her friend who drives her out of state, maybe, or the whoever pays for her hotel or something like
What
that.
if she calls an Uber and gets an Uber across state lines? Do they arrest the Uber driver for conspiracy even if they didn't know what was going on?
I mean, I think it would be hard to, if like that did happen.
That's already in the legislation, Ian. It's already in the legislation. Okay, services like that, they won't be charged because they are a service. Okay? What they are trying to prevent is their girlfriend driving them across state lines. They're trying to prevent these funds in order to be able to get them out of state, in order to be able to carry out this atrocity. Okay? That's what they're doing. Now, when it comes to businesses, no, they're not going to get the Uber driver.
Happened, they arrested the Uber driver, and I'm not a lawyer, I just play one on this podcast apparently. But if the Uber driver took someone out of state and then had to go to court and was like, I had no idea, I've never met this person, I work for Uber,
they would be called in as a witness, and that be pretty much it. But they'll do a they'll do a deep dive on her through their legal system and discovery and all of that shit, and they'll find out if she was the one that was, active, if she had gotten that information from Planned Parenthood or her DHR or her whatever service. That's what they'll do. That they will break that person's Fourth Amendment rights, and they will completely go through all of their social media. They'll go through all of their Google search history and whatnot, and that's how they'll do it. Alabama doesn't ask for permission. They just do it when it comes to law enforcement.
it would be very hard to then have a conviction, in my opinion.
Yeah, how could you ever prove conspiracy unless you have a recorded conversation?
Right, but if it's a couple and they get pregnant accidentally and they go out of state, if the woman can't be
No living being should ever eat processed food for every single meal of their life.
criminally or civilly challenged, could her boyfriend who drove her out?
Why can't the pregnant woman herself be criminally charged?
That's just Alabama law, and a lot of states have something like that.
Oh, don't worry, it's coming. They have it in plan. They have it in the plan. And even though I wish that these people would be sterilized at the same time of their abortion, I also think that there is some leeway in order to be able to get redemption somehow in some way. Because there is that all the way up to the moment of death you can be saved dogma. So there is that, just weigh the scales, but it is already being debated about how they finish this out and conduct it. Who knows? It would fix the problem though when it comes to all of this, because there will be so many infertile women out there running around because they went and they got an abortion that the men won't want those women. That's how most of this usually works.
That a judge will probably strike that down in 2 seconds.
I mean, the law's in effect, but maybe if it were to go to trial, it'd be
Right.
tested.
If this gets tested, you can't have a scenario where a pregnant woman sits down next to her not pregnant friend, and the pregnant woman says, "I want to abort this baby." And the friend says, "I can give you information on a clinic." And then they go, but only the woman who said she knew where the clinic was goes to jail. What? The initiator of the criminal conspiracy is the pregnant woman herself. Now, I'm not saying women should be imprisoned for seeking abortions. Not at all. I'm actually the more...
Well, they imprison women for chemical abuse of a child. If they're pregnant, they put them in jail until they have the baby. I've known several women that have had their babies while in jail. Yes, they were taken to the emergency room and then later on the pregnancy ward at the hospital. However, they were kept in jail until their water broke and that they were pushing the baby out. So, they have that law already. It's not a far stretch thinking that they're going to imprison women for murdering their babies soon.
For old school Democrat pro-choice position, I'm just saying these two laws can't legally exist, because you're going to end up with some...
Oh, don't worry. Alabama will make sure somehow, some way that it will exist, Tim.
One challenging the constitutionality of the criminal conspiracy, saying, for what reason does this one criminal act have an exception where the person who initiates the conspiracy is exempt from the law? And the judge is going to have to say, you can't do that. Either the law applies to everybody or nobody. And if the law itself is conspiracy and not abortion, then the pregnant woman must be charged with conspiracy along with her friend.
But the part that confuses me is that you're saying that Alabama says that the fetus is a human being.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So wouldn't it be conspiracy to murder?
Yep.
Right.
It's a great question.
It is conspiracy to murder.
I mean, I'm just trying to think of what's the actual charge. Personally, I don't think that there's enough here. I don't think there would be enough here to prove the conspiracy angle. And on top of that, is there much enforcement for it? You can create as many laws as you want. Is there going to be much enforcement?
What does enforcement look like, right?
Right.
Yeah, I hate this idea of charging someone for something they did outside of the jurisdiction where it was illegal.
Mm-hmm.
Weed's illegal in a state, so you go to a state where it's legal, get high, you come back, and they're like, you're a fugitive. You just broke the law.
Right,
no, I didn't.
To clarify, the AG is literally saying you are right, and that the crime that's being punished is the conspiracy to commit an act.
Well, the defense against this would be the 14th Amendment, and that the law is not applied equally upon the land, and with the supremacy clause, the federal outweighs the state.
Conspiracy to go smoke pot.
So-
Could you imagine if they try and bust you on a conspiracy to go to a state where something's legal to do it?
That happens all the time. That is absolutely normal, has been around for hundreds of years. If you are in a state and you come together with buddies and plot a crime in another state, regardless, yeah, they're
But
going
if it's
to...
not a crime in the other state, you're plotting to go to another state to gamble, for
doesn't
instance.
matter.
I'm going to Vegas to gamble. Is that conspiracy now because it's illegal here?
That's why the Attorney General's statement of it's an Alabama law and it's illegal here, and so that's what matters. Is what
Right, you can't come into our state and demand that you have an abortion because it's banned here. So, monsters, if you want an abortion, just don't be from Alabama or either move out of Alabama and change your registration as fast as possible. That's how you'll get out of this.
I don't think that a state can decide what I can do in another state. That's insane.
It's interesting.
They do it all the time.
For sure. I mean, the idea, what it makes me think of is like how powerful all the states and how important is state residency, right? Like if you claim residency in that state, are you supposed to obey those laws?
Yes.
More than anything else, even when you're in other states. It's hard to say.
When you're in other states, you can do whatever those other states allow you to. But while you're in Alabama state, no. You don't do any of those things.
I will say it would be interesting to contrast this law to the Idaho abortion trafficking law. So Idaho borders Washington. Washington is basically very pro-abortion. They've got all kinds of times you can undergo an abortion, but Idaho was much more restrictive, and so they had this abortion trafficking law saying like if I'm remembering the language correctly, it's specific to minors. So if a minor got pregnant and approached Planned Parenthood or approached a friend's mom and said, can you please take me to Washington or wherever, Washington is just the key example, to get an abortion, that adult could be brought up on criminal charges because they are if they don't tell the minor's parents. So if they traffic a kid a pregnant teenager out of the state to get an abortion and bring them back, that's against an Idaho law. And the governor of Washington was really adamant that this was a terrible idea and asked him to take it down.
Ian, you make a really, really good point about the absurdity of a system based on pure logic that would say, if it's illegal here, you cannot plan to do it. And that's interesting because you mentioned gambling. Texas, for instance, I just did a quick cursory search. Largely illegal to gamble in Texas. It is a crime to place wagers on sporting events and card games. They have card houses for the most part where you're allowed to do it. So it's questionable as to what they determine to be gambling. And I guess the issue with poker in Texas is that it's considered a skill game, so it doesn't fall in the same category. But the biggest casino, I think, in the country is on the border just north of Texas in Oklahoma. And that's where everyone drives to go. Clearly, you have to talk with your friends and make a plan to go drive up to the country's biggest casino. I think maybe in one of the world's biggest casinos. And then I think it's like a mile wide or something. And then commit crimes. But what that really tells us is our legal system is based on culture and morality and not the written letter of the law. Like I said 1,000,001 times, it's illegal for women to skydive on Sunday in Florida. Google it. It's true. They don't arrest anyone for doing it. Right? There's a ton of laws.
And that is where the chief executive officer of the state is supposed to be doing their job. And if they are not, that's when you vote them out. Or the legislator strikes the law as being absurd.
In the books, like you can't put an apple pie on the windowsill on Tuesday because it mattered back then but doesn't matter now. What the question that's being asked right now is, as our culture breaks down and law becomes the pure exercise of power, all that matters, and I guess this is actually a more black-pilled prescription or perspective. When you're looking at the Joe Biggs case and they're saying we're going to give him 17 years because he's a terrorist, it's like, were the terrorist laws written to prevent a guy from knocking down a 4-foot steel barricade? I don't think so. I think they were written because we're concerned about people blowing stuff up. But now it's being applied in a way that they've decided they can. Morality be damned. You have the question of skydiving in Florida. No one's going to enforce that because nobody, left or right, would agree with the enforcement of it. No one in Texas agrees that you should criminally prosecute someone for conspiracy because they went to go gamble 45 minutes away in Oklahoma. But you're right. They did conspire to commit a crime in the future, and it doesn't matter where they do it. So now the question is, when it comes to abortion, what will we see in terms of the morality? You are going to have AGs who are pro-life. You hear Seamus on the show when he says abortion should be banned nationwide. In the moral view of a pro-life AG, abortion must be stopped. In a state like Alabama where they've banned it, they are going to use the law.
Come on, aim. I really need that motorcycle. Can we get the box? Yes.
Law to whatever novel claim they can to enforce a ban on abortion.
It sounds like the beginning of a attempted pre-crime where they're going to get you and arrest you before you do the crime just by thinking about it, kind of thing. I don't like it.
Oh, they're close. They'll get even closer the closer we get to 2030. Once they install all the brain scanners, we're fucked, everybody. Have fun with that one.
Conspiracy is a component of a criminal action. But I think the issue here is you're right, but it shows that laws are only enforced based on what our society deems to be morally acceptable or unacceptable. No one would stand for a couple of drinking buddies being like, we got to go up to Oklahoma on Sunday and hit the blackjack tables, and the cops bust in the door, be like, you're busted for conspiracy to gamble. Show me your ID. And no one would have thought this possible either, but the issue of abortion is so morally polarized that Oklahoma, Colorado, it's banned there. What happens if you get an AG? Maybe they won't do it now, but let's give it a few years. A new AG comes in and he's thinking, I want to win political points because I want to run for the governor's office. I want to run for the Senate. The only way I do it is if I cater to the wants and desires of the people of my state. Polls come out saying 80% of Oklahomans want abortion banned and people who get abortions to be criminally charged. He's going to go, okay, if I am the AG of ending abortion, I'm going to win the governor's race in 4 years. So what does he do? Conspiracy to commit abortion, conspiracy to facilitate abortion, sends police to the border. What I think we're seeing with the polarization of politics in this country is Democrats aren't going to stop because their base demands it. They want to get elected, they'll do whatever they have to. Republicans don't want to stop because they want to get reelected, and they'll do what their base says. Both sides are demanding more and more.
Two wings, one bird.
Dissociative outcomes or dissociated outcomes. The right says no abortion, the left says unlimited abortion, and now their states have to escalate that policy and procedure, which means in states with unrestricted abortion, they need to add more to it. Now they're going to have to, you got Gavin Newsom, I think it's Newsom right here in the article saying, we will not cooperate with any state that attempts to prosecute women or doctors for receiving or providing reproductive care. Now we're seeing the escalation. Not only will these states allow unlimited and unrestricted abortion, meaning a baby at 9 months, they're also saying they will defy federal law enforcement from trying to stop a woman from traveling to their state to get an abortion in defiance of their own state's laws. The right will then have to escalate in kind, like this Alabama AG is outright saying, we will arrest you for conspiracy before you get the chance. There is going to be an escalation. Gavin Newsom will then say, we will use the powers of our government to protect you if they try to persecute you. And then Alabama will say, if the feds won't do it, we will send our law enforcement or hire private contractors to go and retrieve the criminal fugitive.
Correct.
That's where you lose me. I don't know how states will have the, have the resources to do this.
We don't have the resources. That's the whole thing, Kellen. We don't have the resources to be able to do this, but we will do it. See, they don't give a shit when it comes to Alabama law enforcement. Y'all talk about bad law enforcement officers. They're here. They're here. Okay? And they're trained by the feds. And Mr. Bill Barr, in his interview with Vivek Ramaswamy, revealed that they want to move the FBI headquarters to Huntsville, Alabama. And that's when all of that fucking dropped. And I've been screaming about it here in my little town the entire time. I was like, oh no, the feds are coming. But does anybody listen? Oh, no. They all look at you like you're nuts.
We're truly seeing women start to flee the state for abortions. I don't think any state has the manpower.
It's called G4S.
What is that?
Security, private security company. It's called Securitas. Then you've got PMCs. If it really comes to the point,
it's like mercenaries.
Mercenaries.
Are you kidding? Mercenaries hunt down women. That's insane.
Well, look at where we're at right now.
They're not going to be hunting down the women. That's later. They'll be hunting down the doctors. They'll be hunting down the people that funded those women in order to be able to get to that state. It's the conspirators that they're trying to take out first.
States are either banning it outright and threatening to criminally prosecute those involved, like Alabama is, or they're doing the inverse, saying that there is no restriction at all on when an abortion can take place, and they will defy the federal government from intervening in a warrant.
It is so wild that the states are so different like that.
Mhm.
What do you think? What's your?
Well, I was actually thinking that I don't know if this is even something that could work. There could be something where we start seeing temporary residencies for women who are getting abortions.
You're the
right? 'Cause
smart one.
When I got an abortion, I wasn't a resident of Alabama. I was a resident of a neighboring state.
Mhm.
And I think that could be the way that they
That's
kind
how
of
they'll get
subvert
around it.
that conspiracy charge. So these women or anybody who tries to help them, because they became a resident and then a month later they had the abortion. So you can't say we've conspired in this other state. So I think that could be something. And if states like California are like the polar opposite, well, they're going to do that.
Well, with the follow-up law that they're trying to concoct is that, you know, if you've had an abortion, you can't come back to Alabama. You're not welcome. That's just how they're putting it, you know. So, if this does go through, with the one that they are working on currently, those women that left Alabama for an abortion, they're not going to be able to come back to Alabama whatsoever.
Yeah, we're going to do this. Then that could be something that you see someone like Gavin Newsom saying, well, you know what? If they're saying they can't have abortions, we're going to, not only we're going to say they can do it here, but we're going to put them in housing here too. So they don't get those charges. They're just, it's going to keep escalating. I don't know about making it like some sort of police force or anything like that or going private security. I think the next step would be finding legal ways where they can get away with it. And I think temporary housing would be one of those things. They can claim residency for a period of time while they have an abortion, and then they can move back.
But it's all a great super chat. Someone quoting Steve D saying we're not a nation of laws, we're a nation of political will, from Jason Hutchinson. And so it doesn't matter what anyone does. It doesn't matter what legal loophole someone tries to create. It just matters that an agent of the state says, I don't care what you call it, right? You got one judge telling the Proud Boys you should have called an election official or wrote to them. You got another DA saying, because you wrote to election officials and asked them to help you, you're going to jail. We're going to criminally charge you.
Yeah.
So it's just it's an issue of willpower. Thanks for watching this clip from the Timcast.
Okay, so I have a few clips in here that are just miscellaneous things. I'm probably going to rant and rave over this next one.
Do current nationwide shortages and high gas prices have you asking, what next? Did you know that nearly 100% of our nation...
Is China's economy finally hitting the breaking point? Politicians around the world continue to...
All right, this is the China Uncensored, done by Epoch Times. So, I like to keep an eye on this guy every once in a while because he does have very interesting insights. Is everything that he's telling us accurate? I'm not too sure on that one, but he is a good barometer on the Taiwan stuff. Whenever Taiwan starts to heat up, so to say. And I'm going to turn up the speed because it's hard to actually keep focused on how slow the speed is. So, catch up, baby tomatoes.
prove why we shouldn't have voted for them, and China wants to build a nuclear power plant in Saudi Arabia. What could go wrong? From the China Censored, I'm Chris Chappell. This episode is sponsored by Surfshark. Whenever you go online, you should be using a VPN like Surfshark to cover your tracks, protect your identity. China's economy is in bad shape. And I mean bad. It's in such bad shape that if their economy were a person, they'd be Brendan Fraser's character from The Whale. Although the economy's actually been shrinking, so I guess it's more like thinner. Now, finally, some Western companies are wising up to how bad things are. Billions of dollars are flowing out of Chinese markets in what one economist called a seismic change, which is fitting since the CCP is like an earthquake, mostly in how they aren't good for infrastructure. The Chinese stock markets have been falling for weeks, but not like this. The CCP was getting worried, so this week they did a bunch of stuff to shore up the markets, like reducing taxes on stock trades. It seemed to work. The markets rallied on Monday, and then a bunch of foreign investors used it as an opportunity to sell off their stock at slightly higher prices and get the hell out of Dodge. In just one day, foreign investors unloaded $1.1 billion worth, which somehow I don't think is what the CCP intended. It's not just stock traders that are concerned about putting their money in China. There are even greater fears from big U.S. companies. U.S. Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo said this week that many U.S. firms complain China is becoming uninvestable because of exorbitant fines without any explanation, revisions to the counterespionage law, which are unclear, and raids on U.S. businesses inside China. They're just figuring that out now. I've been saying this for 10 years. Just stop investing in China because things are not going to go well for you there. Hopefully this time they'll finally pull out for good, but...
Yeah, that's right. Anybody who is guilty of actually sending their businesses and the labor over to China, well, this is your fault. So, businesses, you want to stay in business? Well, I suggest that you bring all your labor back from Mexico and China and back to the United States and actually have your manufacturing done here. You would enrich the American economy while also helping community.
I won't get my hopes up. They're as quick to wise up on China as Charlie Brown is at kicking that football. And yet, as Commerce Secretary Raimondo said, all this, she was visiting China attempting to improve ties. Because while China yanked the football away the last 497 times, this time might actually be different. She assured Chinese leaders that the U.S. does not want to decouple from China. Which is probably true. The U.S. does not want to decouple from China, but it needs to. It doesn't need to do it overnight, but if U.S. companies continue to rely on trade with China, there's going to be big, big trouble down the line, like if China's economy collapses, or if China invades Taiwan and we end up at war. I swear, it's like talking to a child. I know you want to touch the squirrel, but it's going to bite you.
Especially with our medications and how almost all of our medications are made in China and India now.
In other words, the Commerce Secretary is either lying about U.S. intentions, or she's being stupid. Probably the second one, since Ms. Raimondo also asked for China's cooperation on broader threats like climate change, fentanyl, and artificial intelligence. Sure, that's going to go well. China's cooperation on climate change?
There's only 2 of those issues that were actually important. See, it's all of this superfluous shit with all of your gender studies that's screwing shit up.
Does she realize China is approving the equivalent of 2 new coal power plants every week? And working with China on fentanyl, that's absurd. The CCP is encouraging Chinese companies to manufacture and export fentanyl and precursor chemicals. This is part...
Yeah, they're just turning the opium wars, they're turning it against us. That's what that's how we defeated India and all of those countries. The British did. And China has taken that exact method of warfare and turned it against us instead of us using it against them like it was in Britain and whatnot. See, it's been turned around on the West.
Part of the CCP's drug warfare. Nothing Raimondo says or does will change the CCP strategy on this. And working with China on artificial intelligence is just obviously stupid. Among other things, the CCP is using AI for its military. The less AI China has, the safer Americans are. And if you think I'm being extreme, here's just one example of how the CCP doesn't take the U.S. seriously. Raimondo is the 4th Biden cabinet official to visit China in recent months, but there hasn't been any reciprocation in terms of top Chinese officials visiting D.C. Although, to be fair, it's probably because they're all too busy making more coal plants and shipping out fentanyl to kill Americans. But if you're concerned that some American politicians are stupid when it comes to China, don't worry. British politicians are too. This week, UK Foreign Secretary James Cleverly visited Beijing, where he said disengaging with China is just not credible. Not credible? It seems like the wrong word, which is just one of the reasons he doesn't seem very credible. China is the UK's 4th largest trading partner, and if I had to guess, there's a lot of pressure from UK companies to maintain that relationship, despite what should be obvious problems in working with the CCP. For example, the CCP has taken away the freedoms they promised residents of former British colony Hong Kong. The CCP planned to use Huawei equipment to spy on the UK, so the UK banned Huawei from its 5G network. A couple of years ago, China banned 5 MPs for criticizing the CCP's treatments of ethnic Uyghurs in Xinjiang. Yet despite this, James Cleverly thinks it's a great idea to keep working with China. And to further illustrate his stupidity, he told the BBC that when it comes to the war in Ukraine, I don't think it is in China's interest for there to be a perception they are supporting actively or even passively Putin's actions. And what happened this week? Putin has agreed to visit China next month for a Belt and Road Forum at Xi Jinping's invitation.
Oh, Christ almighty. Seriously? Oh, no. No. Well, that's not good, everyone. One of the reasons I stay up all night, every night, is because Russia is awake. And I do not sleep until day. Usually. Usually it is around 7 to 8 a.m. when I lay down and go to sleep. And I sleep until around 2 to 3 in the afternoon. And that's been most of the last 2 years. Yeah, that and if I am up during daylight hours, it's usually during this season, during spring and summer, when the days are longer and everything. So yeah, I'm completely paranoid that we're going to get nuked off of the map. That's just how I think, and I'm always up during the quiet hours.
And after the break, Chinese fighter planes are getting real close to Taiwan.
Another commercial.
New, no-till, forage-friendly, cover crop. Welcome back. The CCP is yet again ramping up its aggression over Taiwan. This week, the CCP sent a surge of fighter jets across the median line between mainland China and Taiwan's main island. According to Taiwan's defense ministry, Beijing had sent 24 aircraft, including fighter jets, bombers, and drones, as well as 5 warships close to Taiwan since 9 a.m. on Tuesday. The CCP started crossing the median line like this about a year ago, but it just keeps getting worse. Taiwan's defense ministry said the continued military harassment by the communist military in the region may lead to a sharp increase in tensions and worsen regional security. Yeah, that's exactly what the CCP wants. Apparently, the captain of Taiwan's defense ministry is Captain Obvious. The U.S. military is also concerned about the CCP's pending invasion of Taiwan. That's why they're trying to counter the growing size of China's military with autonomous systems. Specifically, the U.S. goal is to pump out low-cost, reusable autonomous systems, basically drones, at a scale of multiple thousands in multiple domains within the next 18 to 24 months. Because as the deputy U.S. defense secretary says, Beijing's main military advantage is mass. More ships, more missiles, more people. That's a pretty big advantage. That's like saying the only reason you beat me in an MMA fight is because you're taller, stronger, and don't faint at the sight of blood. Maybe we should start bulking up. The CCP isn't just dangerous when it comes to missiles and drones. Meta, the company that owns Facebook, said this week that China is behind the largest ever digital influence operation. They said on Facebook, clandestine users with ties to the authoritarian government racked up more than 550,000 followers by spouting lies about the United States' alleged role in creating the COVID-19 pandemic and criticizing Washington's support of Taiwan. That's insane. But they got that many followers using propaganda instead of just posting pictures of butts. Are those Chinese propaganda accounts actually influencing users? And who are these 550,000 people who follow these Chinese propaganda accounts? I guess they include top officials like Gina Raimondo and James Cleverly. How else could you explain their stupidity on China? Or maybe they're just desperately trying to get China to follow them back. You know what else is stupid when it comes to China policy? Letting Chinese electric vehicles flood your market. This is not happening yet in the U.S., but it is.
Or how about just, allowing them in the World Trade Organization as a favored nation? I would have said that was a bad move, Mr. Kissinger.
Is happening in other countries, including the UK and Australia. We're getting some help from the press. An article this week by an Australian reporter suggested that the Toyota Corolla hybrid might face some tough competition from the fully electric BYD Dolphin. If you just compare on price, it's cheaper to buy the Chinese-made Dolphin. Not cheaper on the sticker, but the Australian government is offering a $6,000 tax rebate if you buy an electric vehicle, so that ultimately makes it cheaper. China's exporting millions of low-cost electric cars every year all around the world, but low cost can come with a high price. Honestly, that should be the official slogan of everything made in China. Hey, why does the gumbo in this Chinese-made crock pot smell like burning asbestos? It's probably fine. Surveillance expert Christopher Balding says the brakes of the electric vehicles could be controlled remotely by China, as well as their in-car microphones and GPS. We'll have Christopher Balding on our podcast, China Unscripted, coming out on Monday, so make sure to visit China Unscripted and check it out and subscribe. And after the break, China's starting a trade war with Japan over environmental concerns. Welcome back. I detailed in a previous episode how Japan's Fukushima nuclear plant, the one that had a meltdown 12 years ago, plans to release treated wastewater into the ocean. But while the International Atomic Energy Agency has said the treated wastewater release plan is safe, the CCP, as we all know, has a much higher safety standard. They care about the safety of their citizens. That's why nothing ever happened in Tiananmen Square, ever. Chinese consumers are punishing Japan over the release of this wastewater. They're calling for boycotts of all Japanese products. Strangely, none of this is being censored by China's internet police. Then again, it's not like they censor practically everything, especially anybody mentioning Tiananmen Square, since nothing ever happened there, ever. China also banned seafood imports from Japan, for safety reasons, even though Chinese fishermen fish in pretty much the same waters.
Yeah.
Japan may take China to the WTO over this, but good luck getting anything done there. That's like telling your teacher on a bully when the bully is the teacher's best friend and taking bribes from them. Man, that's one rough elementary school. But hypocrisy is the CCP superpower, which is why, despite all its alleged concerns over nuclear waste, China is in talks with Saudi Arabia to build a nuclear power plant there, which would be great for Saudi Arabia, because if they work with the U.S. to build nuclear power plants, they'll come with all kinds of restrictions, like not being allowed to enrich uranium to use in nuclear weapons. But China is unlikely to require the Saudi government to adhere to such requirements. China's acting like a cool parent to let their kids' friends drink and smoke and build nuclear bombs. Why can't my mom be that cool? A few years ago, China said they'd like to build 30 nuclear reactors across Belt and Road countries by 2030. And as we all know, products made in China are the best in the world, especially compared to Japan. So there's probably nothing to worry about with these Chinese nuclear reactors. When Saudi Arabian fish suddenly have 3 eyes, perfectly natural. As I've been predicting for years now, the CCP did so much damage with its one-child policy that it's going to overcorrect by trying to force people to have children. In 2016, they changed the one-child policy to a two-child policy. In 2021, they changed the two-child policy to a three-child policy. And now, in 2023, they're offering straight-up cash to encourage people to have more kids. One Chinese county is now giving out cash rewards for couples if the bride is aged 25 or younger. They're willing to spend a lot of cash on women, but only if they're under 25? Are we talking about the CCP or Leonardo DiCaprio? Zhangcheng County in eastern China wrote on their official WeChat account last week that the reward aimed to promote age-appropriate marriage and childbearing. Don't go rushing to China to claim your reward. They're only offering 1,000 yuan, which is about 137 US dollars. So, like many things made in China, this probably won't work as intended. And that money especially won't go very far since China's economy isn't in the best shape right now. And this episode is sponsored by Surfshark. Whenever you go online, everything you do is being tracked and logged by the websites you visit and your internet service provider, and in many cases by your government. That's why no matter where you live or what you do online, you should always be keeping your internet activity private with a VPN. Now, Surfshark has servers you can connect to that's top of the line for the best VPN for privacy and security by PC Mac. So check out Surfshark. With just one Surfshark account, you can connect as many devices as you want. Try it out now. Surfshark has...
Next. Sounds nice.
What do we got here? We got Kyle Ball. Let's listen to what he has to say, right?
Okay, not Jimmy Dore. He's the guest host. Craig, Jardula. Usually Jimmy Dore is on, but sometimes he has a sub. I like Jimmy. He's come a long way from where he once was. I'm glad that he's finally calling out a lot of things that he is calling out. So let's see what his guest host, Craig, has to say.
Right. Same subject. Kyle Ball. Kyle Ball and Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis. As bad as Biden is, you guys are significantly worse, and it's not even close. The Democrats are just way better. They're just way better. They're a trillion times better than Republicans. He's had this argument with himself, but this is still an argument that's still going on. At the end of the day, these
How are they
people.
better?
Well, I have a little proof against it, but I mean, can you guys think of a reason on which the Democrats are
better? I've heard one person, Ben Gleed, give a reason, and it was that thing that never happened.
What did he say?
He said it was because that Joe Biden was going to relieve student debt, and then of course they didn't. So now there's absolutely no. So according to our good friend Ben Gleed, there's no reason that Joe Biden's any better.
I saw him,
that was the one reason he could come up with, and that reason's thrown out the window. So now there's no reason.
Okay.
I bet he'll come up with something.
Here's a reason. Breaking Points I watched. I had a guy talking about that crappy negotiating Medicare negotiating prices on 10 drugs.
Yeah,
that won't take effect until like, years from now.
Right.
They were talking about that as if that's one of the major things Joe Biden got done.
No,
bullshit.
What that was the establishment allowing us to have that so we don't riot. That wasn't Joe Biden giving it to us. That was actually Big Pharma giving that to us so we don't fucking. That wasn't the Democrats twisting the arms of their donors. That was the donors.
See, he's so smart. He's thought this through. I mean, he's got it figured out. It's just, trying to drag all of the others with him. And, unfortunately, mob mentality doesn't work that way. You can't drag them, with common sense. You gotta drag them with freaking emotion. So, that's how that rolls. But, this is the reason I like Jimmy Dore. I mean, he's got real great insights. He's got this shit kind of figured out, and he's able to put it in simplistic terms for everyone. Which for the longest time, I didn't listen to the Democrat side at all. It was outliers that, came to the conservative side because they had to walk away from the left. You have Pearhead Dave Rubin from the Young Turks who did the same thing. He walked away after he had a couple of interviews with Larry Elder and other very no-nonsense type of people. I really wish that he would sit down with Thomas Sowell before he passes. I really, really enjoy Thomas Sowell's commentary, and his life story is just very interesting. How he came up in Harlem, and that it was actually a good place until the Democrats took over. So, I mean, I tend to like to listen to people who have came from the left and no longer associate with the left. Dave Rubin is one of these big ones. I mean, I don't like Pearhead on some issues, but others, he's kind of spot on why he left the left. It's that exact type of thinking. Then it's just like, yeah, you're thinking like a common Alabamian now, because that's how we think. We're either trying to dodge the law or we're working for the law. That's how it is here.
Throwing us some fucking crumbs so we won't riot. That's what that was. That's what the Democrats doing it.
Drugs,
it's the establishment
not
doing
all
that.
the drugs, just 10. Just 10. And by the way, your boy Glebe, he hit it on the nose, right? Because one of the reasons I heard, well, Joe Biden's going to do the whole student debt thing. No, he's not. Student loan freeze is ending. Prepare to pay up starting August 30th. This Friday. And it's so fucked up right now that somebody's calling like the Board of Education and all these other divisions that are dealing with their loans. And the person on the phone are telling them, hey, you got to call us back in 3 months. We haven't figured this out right now. It's confusion like crazy. Joe Biden had a chance. He had leverage when he went to talk about the debt ceiling. He didn't get it done with McCarthy. He couldn't get it done with McCarthy, but he still made sure there was a pipeline of money to go to Ukraine war and any other war they want. But student loan forgiveness, because they're winning.
That was their crown jewel. Didn't get it done. Prepare to pay up. Well, if you want to know why Breaking Points is a lot less popular than this show hosted by a jagoff pothead comedian, now you know. Watch that idiocy. And those are direct lies. She knows those are lies she's saying, and that's just bullshit, so she could go out to her parties and have that same social circle that she wants to have. That's all that is. You have $40 million in the bank, you have a different social circle, and that's all that is. Because their show is a lot less popular than this show. Their show averages around 100,000 views per video. Ours averages about 140. So almost 50% more than them. So, and we're not really trying that hard. They're super trying. They're trying to get all their corporate money, they get all their cabal, they get on, and so that's the result you get. They're milquetoast bullshit that's half the time full of fucking lies, and people see through it. Thank God people see through it.
Her tone of voice is the tone that she uses to tell Kyle about Santa. Okay, if you gotta brush your teeth, and then maybe Santa will come. That condescending, knowing it's a lie. It's for your own good.
For your own good.
I was thinking of other reasons where people would say that Democrats are better than Republicans. One of the reasons I didn't put in here, but you would talk about it all the time. Unions, right? Like, oh, Democrats are better for unions.
They just crushed the union.
Yeah.
Joe Biden just crushed. Joe Biden. There's no bigger fascist in the country than Joe Biden. And why are the prisons full with black and brown people? We're the largest penal colony in the world. Is it because of Donald Trump? It's because of Joe Biden. Why are we right now saber rattling with 2 nuclear powers, and we just sent $200 billion to the most corrupt country?
Oh yeah, also with that 3 strikes and you're out kind of thing. And then the one that he actually sponsored in order to be able to get that that harsh penalty for crack cocaine. Sure, that's blowing up in his face now, huh? They wanted to turn everything into a fucking prison state. Well, y'all accomplished it here in this state. If Alabamians actually want to, look into that, look into the prison systems, how much the wardens are paid, and all of the staff that go along with that. It starts with your county sheriffs and whatnot. But, the wardens in the Fed pens, they're a lot worse.
Country in Europe without any oversight, with enough money to end homelessness 10 times over. Why is it? Why? It's because of Joe Biden. Joe Biden's a fascist. That's why. If you want to know what a real fascist is, that's Joe Biden.
Yeah. Well, it's also because Putin hates the gays. Another good reason why a lot of people would say, well, we have to stop them. Another reason why people would say the Democrats are better than Republicans is they say climate change. But what about this, Jimmy? Nord Stream pipeline.
That's right.
The most catastrophic for the climate, not to mention the Ukraine war. How many bombs are being dropped right now? Can't be good for the ozone layer. It says methane leaking from yet to be explained damage on the Nord Stream 1 and 2 pipelines is likely to be the biggest burst of potent greenhouse gas on record.
In the world.
On record. Guess we shouldn't get to the bottom of it.
No, Joe Biden's doing good work. That's what Crystal Ball will tell you. She was supposed to do that. That's good for the planet. That's good for. She's just like CNN now. They're just like CNN.
What about the case?
Why do they do live shows anymore? I wish they still did those. No.
Oh. What about the case for unity? Right? What about the case of bringing us together? Joe Biden is more of a unifier. He'll bring people together.
Yeah, that's
Donald Trump is divisive, xenophobic. Forget about it. He's awful.
Joe Biden is currently criminalizing his biggest political opponent and trying to put him in jail. That's the opposite of bringing people together.
This says America's headed for a national divorce. It says right here in this article, Americans are deeply divided.
I don't think that's the case. I mean, Tim Cass can sit there and say that it's steady and they're not gaining anybody. But you have the silent majority who are not saying anything, sitting back and watching this shit. And there's going to be a lot of people that are completely hoodwinked this go around because they're going to find out that their voters have flipped on them. And it's because of this shit that they're doing to the orange man.
Along political lies. In one recent poll, more than half of the respondents said they expect a civil war to erupt in the near future.
And people like The people who run this country don't care that there's going to be a civil
Sounds
war.
like the thing we just covered, divide Mexico into 5
That's right.
bits.
They want to divide Brazil.
These companies that run the world are doing that here.
They don't. I try to explain to people that the people who actually run this country are the people who own the military-industrial complex in Wall Street, and they own both parties. And they don't care about this country. They care about profits. Just like Ned Beatty said in Network in 1976, there are no countries. There's only companies and the global transfer of dollars, and that's all this is about. So if they have to have a civil war, literal, in the United States to distract everybody from the game, the economic game that the Republicans and Democrats are playing on us, then they'll have a civil war. They don't. If they have to throw a president in jail, if they have to throw $200 billion into a proxy war, if they have to blow up a pipeline and wreck the ecology, they don't give a fuck. As George Carlin said, they don't give a fuck about you, just like Crystal Ball doesn't give a fuck about you.
There are no such thing as nation states. There's
a big club and you ain't in it.
oligarchs and the rest
Well,
of us.
don't worry about, everybody thinks a big Eyes Wide Shut party. I don't give a shit if they have those parties. Like, the things on C-SPAN they're doing right in front of your face are worse than any, like, devil baby drinking ceremony.
Right.
More people die.
Yep.
It's actually like, I would say bar them down, just drink a baby sometimes.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's settled science, guys. Democrats are better than the Republicans. Just, vote blue no matter who.
Come see us live on tour. We're going to be in Toledo, Detroit, St. Louis, Tampa, Boca Raton, Orlando, Dallas, Houston, San Diego, Bloomington, Illinois. Go to jimmydore.com
Oh, that's
for all those tickets.
interesting. You know where Boca Raton is? That is Tucker's home. Interesting. And that is our lineup for the night. It is done. Well, I think we skipped one little mini doc, but that's okay. I think it was about 18 minutes long, so. Hi, Panda. Lumpy Panda is back to say hello, but I don't think he's going to come into the camera shot, so he's just going to sit here and mew at me. So, yeah, that's been about it, everyone. And I hope you enjoyed this episode of Wickedshizuku's Reviews, Thoughts on News, and I will see you Monday. Have a good evening. Night-night, everyone.